Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest interview for seasoned gaming patrons. My guest today is none other than Jeremy Penter. You know him better as ACG. I've always been a big fan of his work, and I had the pleasure of meeting Jeremy last year. And so today we're going to talk about a lot of things, including YouTube and the algorithm itself, how we get started into content creation, what we think about people getting into content creation today and how much of a challenge that is, how the gaming industry is evolving and what's to come next, and a whole lot more. I hope you enjoy it. But I also want to take a quick moment just before we start to thank all of our current patrons and to just say if you haven't checked out Season Gaming's Patreon lately, we just got it up and running a few months ago. We've produced a lot of content over the past several weeks, and we would really appreciate if you check it out, as it helps to support the things we do and helps us to keep continuing with creating honest gaming journalism. So for now, let's get to the interview. And we are live with Mr. Jeremy Penter. You know him as ACG. Good morning, man. How you doing?
Morning. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for sticking through all the scheduling.
No worries, man. It has been a crazy first quarter for games. So someone like yourself that does so many reviews and impressions and podcasts and walkthroughs, like I can only imagine the amount of time you're putting into creation right now, man.
Yeah, it's awesome though. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been probably one of the best quarters for gaming I can remember. I mean, it's just been fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely equal to like or I think it was 2013 or whatever when Microsoft did BioWare, Bizarre, and Bungie at the same fall, where they did a Halo, they did what did they do? They did Mass Effect.
2007.
Yeah, 2007.
Yeah.
I remember Shane Kim, I think, was running it then, and I remember just being like, that's a pretty insane, and not against Sony. I'm just saying that if it was Sony, I'd say the same thing. That was a pretty insane year to live through. And this has been pretty friggin' close. Oh, can we cuss?
Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I won't just be dropping F-bombs, but I
just... Yeah. No, you're good to go. Yeah, it's nuts, man. It's and the crazy thing, right, is it doesn't really show any signs of slowing down. It just feels like that's the state of the industry now. There's so many developers, so many games. It's just constant, which is great, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Spoiled for choice, if you will. So, well, yeah, man, I know we've been trying to do this a while, so I'll just thank you again for formally coming on. It was funny. One of the guys who follows our channel just randomly posted the other day. He's like, Ains, I don't know if you know ACG, but it'd be great to hear you guys sit down and talk. And I was like, well, that's good timing.
Yeah, that is very good timing, because we also got to do, which podcast did we do together? Was it Iron
We did
Lords,
the Lords. Dutch? No, we did the Lords with what were we talking about at the time? It wasn't Mass Effect.
Was that with Boomstick as well?
I don't remember, honestly. It was
one
of the
like to fill up their podcast, right? The Lords is like a buffet on the Pacific Coast at like 7 a.m. on a Sunday when everybody's either pre-church or after church, and you go in, you're like, what the hell is going on? Everybody's here.
It is true. Yeah, they have pretty much everyone from the gaming community in one spot, which is cool. So before we get into, obviously, everything about your content creation, how you got into it, all that, I always like to go back and just start with gaming in general. And I know that you've been doing this a long time, like myself. That's, why we're here. When did you start? What got you originally into gaming, way back when you were a little centaur?
Oh, when I was a little kid, my mom and dad bought us, we had Pong, which was the little white bars. And I was into Dungeons and Dragons big time. And then I think my dad one Christmas got an Atari 2600.
Of course.
And that's pretty much, like they were pretty cool about it. My dad wasn't around a lot because he was a really hard worker. He had his own business. It was a fish plant. So he was like, because we do come from, Rednecktopia on the West Coast. So it's like logging or fish plant back then. It's not that now, but it was always like, you didn't have a lot of stuff to do, playing outside a lot of times. But then when a winter would come, you wouldn't really have much. And so we got the Atari 2600, and I remember just playing the hell out of it. And the graphics were so bad that one of the manuals actually told you who the main character was. It had to tell you. It was like, you're the brown dotted dude with the white hat. I believe it was Indiana Jones, and it had to tell you who you were because you couldn't even figure out. That's how bad the graphics were, but it didn't matter.
Yeah, everything was just cubes. Yeah, but it was so revolutionary at the time. We had never experienced something like that. It was, to do that at home was just revolutionary.
And it wasn't actually that expensive. I believe the Atari, if I remember right, I think Dad still has the receipt, and I think it was only $199, which admittedly, if you look at inflation, that's a lot.
Sure.
But still, that's not what I expected. Like that's I don't know why I expected it to be even more expensive because that kind of stuff back then. A personal computer was ridiculous. Hard
Yes.
drives were $700, but that one is still in the $199, which was weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember my dad first getting our first computer from Radio Shack and him signing a contract to buy it,
To
which
buy
was
it,
like
yeah.
several $1,000s at the
Yeah.
time. In the 80s, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, wild.
Well, we know it's in the 80s when you mention Radio Shack, though.
Of course.
Right?
Yes.
Radio
No
Shack.
doubt.
I can sing the Radio Shack jingles. Payless. I don't know if you guys know what Payless is, but
Of course.
they'd have a they'd be like Merry Christmas from Payless, and I loved Christmas. So like when the jingles came on TV, I was just like, let's get some games, bitches. It was yeah. I'm such a Christmas freak.
Back then it was like, and all those stores, right? Payless, Radio Shack, all those, they're all part of that mall theme for Christmas.
Yeah.
Right? It all had to do with going to the mall and then experiencing Christmas with Santa and everything.
Yeah, it was so good.
Wild. Yeah, just a different era, man. Completely different era. But has it been part of like a core part of your life ever since? Was there ever a time in your life where you just kind of left gaming for a while and came back to it later, or has you
Video
always
gaming?
been
No.
diehard?
No. I have like 3 martial arts video games. I did a lot of dirt track racing when I was younger, so that
Sweet.
would come in. Dungeons and Dragons was always there, mostly always there, but video games was always there. As long as I had the money, video games were there because at some point you go past the point where your parents want to buy you ones and they start to be like, you need a job.
Yeah.
And I was pretty listless when I was like, I wanted to do entertainment shit. I didn't want to work. And strangely enough, I always got really hard jobs. I don't know how it happened. I hauled steel. I did lumberjack. I worked at my dad's fishing plant. So like I wouldn't have time. I would come home and be like roasted. I'd be physically tired, so I wouldn't play games. So sometimes it would go out for a month or so, but most of the time I was gaming.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So, we talk about the journey up till relatively recently as YouTube got bigger and, the social media space got bigger. What did you ever have kind of like when you first got into content creation? Like, was that a plan, or did you just say, hey, I love these games things, I'd like to do more with them, let's start trying this new YouTube thing and see how that happens? Or did you have like a formulated plan?
No, I had no plan. I definitely wouldn't be doing it if something happened with my employment, but I started out making Arma levels and showing people how to make an Arma level in less than 5 minutes. I was like, here's the way to make a level that never plays the same, because I've always been into procedural content, and Arma has the ability for you to randomize things. And I was like, listen, this can take 5 minutes. You can play this game 100 times. So I made a couple levels there. I did a couple reviews. I was big into the level creation stuff. And then I got fired, or laid off is what they call it. But regardless, you're not working there anymore.
Right.
And I got laid off, and I had luckily saved some money, and I had paid my wife's way through college. So I was like, I'm going to try YouTube, because what I was noticing is that my friends I never ever in my life rated a game on a number. Like, we never did. And I'm not dissing on anybody who does. I'm just saying we never did. It never came up because a number didn't mean anything. Like, this game's an 8 compared to what? Is it an 8 if it's $10 off? It never made any sense. And so what I was noticing was that a lot of people, we'd get into groups at my job, or we'd get into groups at my home, and people be like, well, what do you think? And I was into music, into audio. I also study. I take lessons in everything. So like, one of the things as a reviewer I've always been bothered by is that a lot of people don't know how games are made. So like right now I'm taking 3 advanced Unreal classes. I'm always wanting to do stuff too, because it's not ADD. I don't know what you'd call it. I just never sleep. So I'm always doing stuff, and I'm studying stuff. And I got laid off, and I was just like, I'm going to try it and see if it works. And it worked pretty quickly. It's not necessary. It worked pretty quickly, but it was just not like it is today. There was no desire to make sure everything looked right. You didn't have to worry about audio. You didn't have to worry about, you could just, now production levels are insane. Somebody will come to me and they'll be like, hey man, haven't started my channel yet. I'm thinking about spending about $6,000 to start it. I'm like, what? I spent like $9. And obviously if you go back and look at old stuff, you can tell, but it was a different time where you could get in on your personality or on your knowledge of stuff. So I got lucky. I got really lucky. Everything came together because I was getting paid incredible money for what I was doing. So I would probably still be doing it despite hating it, or not hating it, but
Yeah, not being what you love. Yeah.
Not doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, and it is wild nowadays. When you look at, and that's kind of what I was going to ask you too, and we'll get there down the road. But it's like the difference, even in just the past like 5 years of
Yeah.
how many, not only just how many content creators there are and channels and everything else, but the level of production quality, like you said, is just through the roof, and it makes it it's starting to make it very hard for new people to kind of get in, right?
Yeah.
So the people like yourself who got in years and years ago, it's just awesome to see. So I actually went back to your channel, and I don't know if you've curated it, but on your channel today, do you know what the oldest video is on your channel off the top of your head?
I know one of the oldest videos is, well, podcasts, but one of my oldest is a review for a castle game. I can't remember.
So the one that's showing there is from May 14, 2013. So coming up on 9 years ago now. It was a review for Dead Island Riptide on the
Dead Island
360.
Riptide. Yeah. My best friends, by the way. The Vermintide devs are the ones who made that. They're also my very first meeting at a GDC. And I run in and I'm like, dude, I reviewed your last game. It sucked. And we're best friends, man. Victor's been on my podcast like 25 times, it feels like. Brian Liam O'Neill's been on a couple times. And we ended up leaving, and it was a really fun experience to do GDC with them. And yeah, that wasn't my first review, because I do delete all like old crappy ones that are just like testing or whatever. But that is awesome, and that will never get deleted. So it'll most likely always be the first one, because if there was a couple people that I met or that helped me, that if they hadn't, I probably, whatever I'm doing now would probably look different. And I went to GDC with like 30,000 subs and met them. And Magnuson emailed me like 10 days later, and he was like, I've never had a better interview in my life. He's like, we laughed so hard. Because, dude, we were playing the game. We were fucking around. We were joking, and that's the way I am. And that sort of solidified that it can be positive. So I didn't have a bad experience. I had a good experience with an interview with a company that they knew the way I was, because I was like, dude, that Riptide, it's fucking terrible. And they're like, no, we watched your review. We know. I'm like, all right, I'm just saying, we need to be online. And the cool thing is they'll feed back to me. They'll be like, you were wrong on this, blah, blah, blah. It is just really cool to start that way. And then the other thing that changed, not necessarily changed where I was going, but Total Biscuit and I, because I was getting popular at the same time, and Total Biscuit admittedly is pinky up, he's a little like, I don't know if you want to call it pretentious, but whatever. And we had some reviews that clashed a couple times, and some of the stuff he did, he turned off comments, which at the time I didn't know why. I was like, why are you turning off comments? Like, that's a feedback mechanism. Admittedly, he was right. I was wrong. But we went back and forth a couple times. He DM'd me a couple times. We talked, and I wouldn't say I was antagonistic towards him, but there were times where I'm like, why are you doing it this way? Like, why are we pinky up on this when it's still a fun game? Because sometimes he'd go hard on a game for like, I'd be like, dude, I don't get it. Why are you going hard? Why are you like taking this fucking game to the paint? Like, you're just destroying it. You're kicking the shit out of it. He has to buy new shoes. I'm like, why are you kicking the shit out of this game if there's just one thing wrong? And it was never mean or anything. Then I was having issues with monetization. I was getting demonetized all the time. I would upload a video, demonetized instantly. And this is just YouTube. And he contacted me out of the blue. And he's like, do you want me to help you with this? And I was like, fuck. That's nice of him. So then we started talking, and then we found out we both loved airsoft. And then we were like, all right. And then after a while, we're like, dude, I think we're fast friends right now. And then we just started talking more and more, and he helped me. And in fact, one of the things that started, when I started, I would ask people for help. There would be no help. So that's why on my patron level, I do have to do it on Patreon, because I can't help everybody. But we do have like a help assistance level, which is just like, because we all make the same mistakes, and I made the same mistakes, and I lost so much time making those mistakes. And Total Biscuit helped me out with like 4 or 5 of them. He was like, you can do this, and you talk this way, so maybe you should do this, where I don't do that. Like, he was very open to people being different than him in their delivery of game information. It was very cool. It was very cool. So I had 2 awesome sort of polar opposite interactions that sort of got me like to understand, exactly how it should probably be run.
Yeah. Yeah, and sounds like pretty early on too, which then
Yeah, they
helped
were
you
pretty
escalate, right?
early on. Like Mad Max and a little before that was Totobus. That was 2017 or 15 when Mad Max came out when we
Yeah.
started talking. But prior to that, yeah, really, really early was the Vermintide guys. And then just over time picking up on things and being like, oh, I think I can probably do it. And then
Yeah.
luckily seeing success. I think right now I wouldn't though. If I
Really?
started, no, because even I've noticed, and I've talked to every reviewer about this.
Yeah.
Views are going down
Yeah.
dramatically, and because there is so much noise when a game comes out. There's
Hmm.
so much noise. There's 10 things you need to know. Don't play this game until you watch this. Don't play this game until you watch this, because there's 10 things you maybe perhaps possibly need to know. And these video titles get, and all this stuff. I would have to do something weird, really weird, or again, work really hard, which
Yeah.
is not bad, but I mean, unrealistically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely different. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit. So at what point, and we'll circle back to that kind of modern, 2022 look at it, because I know you've been pretty vocal about some of the challenges and not challenges, well, challenges and issues with Google and YouTube lately. And I think a
Yeah,
lot of
they
creators
suck.
have, yeah, yeah, it's been a problem, right? Especially for smaller channels like me and
Yep.
plenty of others. But at what point, like, so that's 20, early 2010s, what have you, you're doing this, you get your YouTube up and going, you're starting to get tens of thousands of subs. At what point did you think to yourself, this is it, this is viable long term for me to do, for the foreseeable future?
Not the way I think. When I got laid
No.
off,
Okay.
it was instantly, it has to be viable,
Okay. All right.
or I'll walk away. So that's when I started putting plans. So when I got laid off, I had already had a couple good reviews, but I was busy. I was working,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked about 75 hours a week. So I would have to like crunch in a game. And I knew scheduling. That's pretty much the only thing I mean, and this isn't dissing on me, but, or it's not like self deprecating, but I honestly believe one of the only things I offer to gaming is probably the score system as well as scheduling. I'm good at scheduling. That's what my job was. And so, like, I can schedule reviews very easily. I can be like, all right, I need 45 hours for this review, blah,
Mm.
blah, blah. And so I can parse things out. And the moment I was laid off, I was like, it has to be.
Mm.
And that's the way I treated it, was it has to be.
Okay.
Like, under no circumstances will it not be. And I'm not a dummy. I say that and I go forward, but you're always checking. You're looking at benchmarks going, is it worth it? Is it not?
Of
That
course.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
because I don't do sponsors and stuff, which is huge. Like, that's a massive financial removal from the channel.
Yeah.
Like, massive. I've been offered $10,000 to cover a mobile game, like multiple
Really?
times. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's, by the way, 3, 4, 5 months of YouTube in
Yeah.
one video. But
Wow.
yeah, no, I pretty much decided it was going to be a thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild, man. But I think it's fair to say, I think that's why myself and so many kind of respect you, right? Is that I think for many like us who have been around gaming a long time, have seen these sites come and go, see plenty of sites today that do things what I always preach about is the wrong way in my eyes, and the negative way. I think someone like yourself who just kind of does it what we would consider the right way, if there is a right way, but in a way that's honest and forthright and detailed. Because you know as well as I do, there was a mentality, especially from the bigger outlets at a time, where a video review should have been like 5 minutes, 6 minutes. And, it's this very surface level look at something. And I think people like yourself have proven, look, there's a huge community out there that wants something different from that doesn't do anything for us. You know what I mean? Like, I want that 20-minute detailed review that's going to tell me about mechanics and design. And we'll get into your walk in the walk stuff, which I love. But I
Okay.
think that, I think that that's a credit to you and what you've created over the past several years.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, that's why I say the note sponsored and not 2 minutes long. Sometimes I'll say it and sometimes I won't, because I don't do scripting like most people do. It's off the cuff. So when I do, I try to remember to put it in there. But one of my first videos was bitching about Witcher 3 reviews, because I was so stunned that people were doing 3.5-minute reviews. And
Right.
so people will be like, who did 2-minute reviews? They'll get mad at me. And I'll be like, dude, that's a little bit of hyperbole. Let's be honest. But
Sure.
right now we have multiple channels that are called 3-minute reviews.
Yep.
Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But that also proves that there are people that want the opposite. And I definitely, where I've worked, you're always looking to shoot the gap versus. So shooting the gap, at least in our business sense, was like looking at what was working, trying to figure out if you have something unique and injecting it in there. For example, we were talking about OSTs for the last 20 years for games. No one covered music. And I was like, well, this makes no fucking sense. Why is nobody covering music? Or they'll be like, the music was bombastic. I'm like, Michael Bay can say that. That doesn't mean shit. Yeah. And I'll have people straight up will be like, can't watch his review. Can't watch his review. He talks about music. And I'm like, good, bye. Because that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The very reason they don't want to watch my review is the very reason I started doing reviews, because I didn't like what I was seeing. So if they don't like what they're seeing, you know, I know it's a negative and they're trying to be like, haha, you lost me. And it's like, no, I never gained you. I'm more interested in who I gain than who I lose, because you can't please everybody. I'll have people come into the channel and be like, I love you. This is the best review ever. I just found you. And I always tell people in the Discord, I'm like, that person will leave because they're too emotionally tied up in what they just heard, and I will piss them off at some point. And there's a lot of reviewers, you can tell, are very tentative about that. They're very tentative, or they find something that works, a hate for a company or a love for a particular company, and they latch onto it because they get nervous. And I'm like, dude, I've had cancer. Like, do you think fucking video game reviews matter to me? They don't. You can be serious while you're doing it and then not take it serious afterwards. And so that's what I do. I take the review serious because somebody gave me a game. Then the moment that review goes up, you're done. Like, what do you can't go back and retroactively I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So it's like you have to emotionally disconnect. And I do think that you'll hear people say they respect it. I don't think everybody does. I'm not saying you don't, but you'll hear the typical stuff where people are like, I love your stuff. And you'll be like, have you watched my shit ever?
Yeah.
But we've talked. Like, I want to make sure people don't think that of you, but it does pop up a lot. And I do know it can piss people off, because sometimes people feel they have a valid point and they want to bitch about it. And I'll be like, that's great, but it is just video games. Yeah. And right now there's a war. And I don't believe in like whataboutisms, but at some point, if somebody's really tight because I didn't love a game, or I rated one game a buy and one game a wait, and they're that tied up, I almost don't want them to continue to follow, because I'm nervous that they're that's not, I'm not saying it's not healthy, but that's pretty raw to be that stressed about an opinion somebody else has. Yeah. You know, you can love it because you get data, but when you start getting into this cult of personality shit, it's really disturbing. Yeah. It's actually sort of gross. But.
It is. It absolutely is. And sadly, I don't know about you, and maybe it's just the space we live in today with social media, but it seems pretty prevalent. You know what I mean? There seems to be a lot of that, and it's exhausting. We talk about it all the time on our channel, where it's like that's actually, you know, you talked about your kind of inspiration for how you started your channel and why, or why you wanted to do reviews and videos the way you did. That's what you just mentioned there is why I started Seasoned Gaming. Is I was pretty tired of the constant just bickering and console pitting against each other, you know, all the nonsense that goes on and the negativity. And I was like, this is not what gaming is supposed to be about. You know what I mean? This is a positive thing that has brought us joy for decades. Like, why are you arguing about them every day? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. And I think that like generalized discussion around stuff is great. Critiquing is great if you have the knowledge, but at some point it becomes weird. I don't know. I am very, admittedly, I am probably an outlier in the way people act online. I do know it because even Total Biscuit told me that. He's like, hey, I had some issues when I was smarting off to people. You know, it didn't look good for me. And I was like, I don't give a fuck, like, at all. Like, that's, I won't do that to somebody who's not being a smartass. Right. But if they are, walk in, expect to have somebody, challenge you. And I see that people are negative, and I think that that's very valid. Critique is very valid. It's very valid when you do a video and you make a mistake, that somebody can say, hey, dude, you made a mistake. I make them all the time. Like, especially because I do a lot of data and a lot of examples. For example, I trace microtransaction purposes across mathematical curves in a game when I'm reviewing it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I do a lot of, and I talk about it sometimes, but it's just like, sometimes I don't want to tell my secrets for like how I come up with an opinion, but I'll be like, and it's funny because when you're reviewing a game, no lie, man, this happens a lot. You'll be reviewing a game, and if you watch other reviews, you can tell if somebody's played that game very long or not.
Oh, yes. Big time.
You can, like, instantly be like, that person did not play the game. I saw people on Assassin's Creed not know that the Assassins or the Cultist tab came up. They were like, there's nothing else to do. And I was all, Dude, that comes up in the first like 20 hours of the game, doesn't it?
Yep.
And that's not even dissing on people that don't, because you can't finish every one. You just have to tell people that you don't. You can't finish an NFL game. How are you going to review that? But
Yeah.
you do, when you do start tracking stuff, the more detailed you'll get, you'll make mistakes. So that's cool, but it's just really weird, man. Sometimes you get that negativity and you're looking at it and you're like, man, there's a lot of things to be really upset about, and I'm not 100% sure this is where you want to like die on the sword.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. There's far more important things to be pissed off about right now than this.
Yeah.
About that review, because I yell about that all the time. Is when I do a review, everyone has their own methodology, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. But I'm very big proponent of really experiencing the game, and I loved your point about understanding how and why games are designed the way they are, at least at a base level, right?
Yeah.
Or so that you can kind of offer perspective on what they were going for and did they achieve it and these types of things. One of the things that drives me up the wall, and I don't know what you think about it or how you handle it, is when I do see those reviews, right? I'll see a review that gets tens of thousands of reviews or hits or whatever. And then you watch it or listen to them and you're like, they didn't even get halfway through the game. Like, it's blatantly obvious that they didn't, really put the time in the game. Does that drive you crazy as much as it does me, or is it just me?
Well, it does, but one thing I've taken away from it is that, well, first of all, like I said, it does happen. You should be clear about it, because, I just call them review in progress, which nobody gets mad about. I don't like doing review in progress because I am against that. But if I can't get through a game, especially like when you have Dark Souls and Forbidden West and all this stuff, and you're like, all right, something's got to give, because I can't work, time travel. By the way, if my face looks red in the video, that's because I also teach martial arts. So I just got out of that. So I think my blood pressure is sky high right now. Well, no, it's actually low, but I feel sweaty. So anybody who's watching is like, Carrick's going to have a stroke? No, I am not, but I do look like a cherry. It was a hot workout this morning. But you have time, you try to do stuff, you try to review stuff, you try to cover it, and sometimes you can't. But yeah, you get those times where maybe you're listening and you're like, I normally don't care too much anymore. What I care about is I very much see a slant where some companies, so a company is disliked, their game is good, but the game somehow gets driven into it's bad because they don't like the company or the publisher. And that to me is very, if I reviewed cars and I said the manufacturer of the screws has been known to, overwork their workers, so therefore the car review is bad, that's not factual.
Right.
And so the only thing I really care about is factual stuff. So even if the person hasn't played a bunch, they say review in progress. If they're factual about it, it's fine. But I do see the so I would say it's more to me is when I'm like, well, for example, the ape game that came out where you were apes, humankind.
Yeah.
Did you see what the developer said about that? There were reviewers stating something about when you ride horses, it's bad. And he's like, there's no horse riding in the game. That's weird. Like, then you have to go, wait, what's happening here? But I can't worry about what other people are doing. And if somebody gets 10,000 views and I got one, if that one person cared because it was detailed, I actually think that is, to me, it's worth a lot, because that means that they're not a part of the 10,000 that doesn't care. Because a lot of people will pretend to care, they'll argue, but then you'll see them talk about a review that isn't covering a lot, and you'll be like, all right, so which side are you on? Because if you're saying you care about some particular part of a game, but you're using like this thing which is factually incorrect, how much do you really care? Or are you just here to argue today? Which does happen. I just try to move on from it, and like I said, I out-create. That's one of the things whenever anybody new comes in and they're like, hey, I'm getting beef, because there's apparently Twitch is big on beef, YouTube less so, but people having issues with each other. And I definitely noticed now that we're getting some Twitch streamers on YouTube, they're starting to like artificially try to create drama between each other. They don't create drama usually with YouTubers. They're trying to create drama with like Twitch streamers who've come to YouTube, which is really weird, because the beef that occurs on YouTube, at least for me, has been beef requires two people. Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm out. I don't give a fuck. You do whatever you want, blah, blah, blah. You'll see smaller channels, though, that will get, I guess you call it hate brigaded, or whatever. There's been a couple people reached out to me. What I usually say is take whatever precautions you have to take. But the big thing is to out-create somebody. Because what happens with negativity, a lot of people shut down creation.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I have outlets. Martial arts is one. I teach boxing. Those are one. So I lift weights all the time. So I'll go lift weight. It sort of burns out over there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can come back and create. Because I'll tell you what, if I sat and looked at every negative comment, it would lower your creation ability. Because that's what those people are hoping for, in a way, is to sort of stop you. They're bit, and that's usually what I tell new people is just you have to out-create.
Yeah.
Out-create. And you'll make mistakes and people will bitch. But I'll tell you what, dude, I don't know if you saw that stat, but it's like 800,000 billion gillion hours of YouTube videos uploaded every minute.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So it's nuts. So it's like, this too shall pass, man. And, it's like, all right, it's here. You made a mistake or your review isn't in line with everybody else's. Move on.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Good points. So talking about out creating, let's talk about walking the walk. So walking the walk, and I know I've said this to you before, but you're walking the walk of Witcher 3, which is one of my favorite games of all time. That's actually what originally turned me on to your content. And what
the
really
walking the walks?
Yeah, the walking the walk of Witcher 3 specifically, and obviously since then. I went back and looked this morning when I was kind of looking through your content, and that was almost 6.5 years ago, that video. Which is nuts. But I just absolutely love the detail, right? Like it's the type of content that goes into what we were talking about, where you're kind of analyzing how developers created a game world, right? And kind of commenting on that. And I think that's not only unique content in the space, but it's important because I think that we've talked about it, right? A lot of reviews are surface level, and then reviewers like yourself, myself as well, and some others go into more detail. But when you're talking about an hour and a half video, you can really start to really fine tune or hone in on specific details of design and development and why developers may have done something the way they did, things you may not even notice while you're playing or reviewing a game. And I just absolutely love that, man. So like, what was the inspiration for that, like to create that series? And do you still love kind of going through that as much as you once did? Do you still love doing that with modern games?
Yeah, the views are terrible. The views are terrible. And they're just and one of the reasons why is because you won't catch me doing. So this is another thing that happened early, which colored the walking the walks. I'm interested if somebody mimics real life, how they mimic animal systems, technical, how they made the game. Like with Watch Dogs, they went and recorded just people walking down the street to sort of get the real vibe of that location, those kind of stuff. So this happened to me. I'm not going to say who it was because I don't think that's needed. But there are a couple very popular lore YouTubers with very long videos. And I happened to know one of the developers for a game. And we were talking, this is prior to Discord, I believe, even. This was like, I don't even know what we used prior to Discord, probably what the Microsoft Skype. And I said, hey, I'm going to go watch this video. And they said, well, don't take it seriously or something. And they were considered one of the more serious, like, lore creating, like people who created lore videos. So I said, what do you mean? He said, dude, none of those are ever right. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, you'll have somebody be like, this is the color blue because blah, blah, blah. It goes with the, this sign over here and, in this game. And you see this design over here, which actually might mean that there was a secret here, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, nah, dude, it's never right. Because ever. Like he was like, developers aren't thinking that. And he gave me a very good example. He said, the lead developer can, and the producer can. Though producers change their job, the way they run in a company, some producers do different things. But like the Vermintide guys, their producers do a very specific thing. But overall, you can identify who has what touch. For the most part, there is not enough time nor enough communication between all these groups for somebody to say, hey, this over here is going to just hint at something over here, or at least many of them. Some of them will happen. but not near as many as for 3-hour lore videos. And
Sure.
I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, dude, the business doesn't allow for that. It makes no sense. He's like, there's not communication like that. There's not even, it would be impossible, because you would have to talk to the texture guy, you'd have to be like, yeah, you have to put this one thing here. It has to be there. And 1, again, is possible. 2 or 3 is possible. But when you start hearing like there's 40 or 50. So what I did was I looked at those. I didn't want to cover tech stuff too much, because I get really tired of people being like, if we zoom in on this corner of this fucking box at 8,000, there's approximately, 14, missing pixels. And you're like, dude, what? Like, I mean, I love the tech, but that is not in my enjoyment of the game. And so what I did was I was like, well, I love history. I love reading. I read voraciously, and I like facts. So what I started doing was studying for every one of them, and or just my own knowledge from reading. And that's how Witcher 3 came about, was like talking about the rocks, the shale, how they built correct, actually geology. All of that was actually done right in some places. There was a crazy amount in Witcher 3 that was done correctly, and much of it's because they had somebody take a picture of an old, Norwegian village. And so of course it's going to mimic if the art designer looks at that and says, let's pretty much put it here. But then it stretches across all that. Horizon Zero Dawn did that. I was wrong about something. I did one for Forbidden Wilds, I think. And the lead developer tweeted it and was like, this is amazing. It has stuff in it I didn't even know or think about. And then they DM'd me and they said, actually, you thought it was this. It's not. But now that I see what you said, I'm wondering if subconsciously I was thinking that, because that is exactly what it looks like, but that's not at all. And so you get this cool thing, but I decided to get away from like the lore stuff and get into how they're made and how they're put together. And that was more fun. And art, color theory, music, stuff like that. So
yeah, it's amazing, man. I think it's very unique content and it's insightful. And I just wanted to call that out, because like I said, that's how I originally found you, and it's some of my favorite stuff that you do, honestly.
Yeah, I wish more than 10 people watch those fucking things.
It is a shame, right? Like because
they
I'm
don't
sure
make any money. They don't do any Oh, dude, they make shit money. But people who watch them voraciously.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah. So they'll have high thumbs up or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've noticed, but I started doing them now on the new games. I've been asking companies, I've been like, well, why should I wait? Now, you should wait because of spoilers. I found that out. I released one early and I was like, whooops, that's probably not the best plan. People aren't going to want to watch this.
Right.
But I've definitely been I did one for the Ascent, where I found the program that lets you hack the camera in Unreal games, and I found out that in the Ascent they have a full city that you never see. And
really?
So in my walk in the walk, I did it all in first person, and I was like, this is what a cyberpunk game should look like. Yes, I was being a dick, but I was like, this is what cyberpunk really should have been, and was showing all that kind of stuff intrigues me, like what's going on behind the scenes, how people do stuff, how they cheat. I love that. When you find out a developer cheated some way, and you never, like, some awesome thing happens, and then you found out that like it was a bug. Like there was the thing for Skyrim. They just did an amazing video. Jonah Loeb, the artist, he got everybody together to do an anniversary video for Skyrim, and he was talking about some of the things that they couldn't figure out. And one came up, and it was that the original. They were talking about Bethesda and Whole at this point, but Todd Howard stated that on the original Xbox, Morrowind crashed all the time. So what they did was, and it would crash when loading. So they found out a way to keep a buffer frame of the loading screen, and the entire Xbox rebooted in the loading screen.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
So sometimes you'll get a very long loading screen. That's the Xbox original actually fully rebooting and getting back to that point and starting again. And I was like, what the hell? That's amazing. And so that stuff excites me. And the walk-in walks are fun.
Yeah. Well, it's that kind of understanding of game design developer insight that's important, right? Like, and that ties back to reviews, like we were talking about. When you start to understand the types of things that designers, developers, artists, what have you, put into a game, it gives you a different perspective when you're actually reviewing a game.
Yeah.
And I think that's just, I think that's important.
I think it's also fair, because I could go and buy a Hyundai Genesis and then race in like an F1 race, but if it did poorly, should I bitch about it? No. And so what happens is you get a lot of people who will be like, well, this game doesn't do this and doesn't do that, and it's like, it never planned.
Exactly.
Never planned to do that.
Exactly.
and it's not only a false equivalency, it's really just not an accurate reflection of what the title is. It's just that that's not the title. You should be able to, what I usually believe is that when you go into a review, you're asking questions. Is it a good genre representation? If it's not, because it's a mixture, does it mix the genres well? Because we definitely get a lot of mixed genres now, like Gears of War Tactics, which turned out amazing.
Yeah.
But who thought that? Like when I first played Gears of War, if somebody said, hey, we're doing an XCOM style game, I'd be like, what the fuck? That's gonna suck. And but once you understand what they were trying to do, now it fits perfectly in their world. And I'm like, I get it. But you have to have that. If you don't, man, I just don't think that's fair. And at minimum, you should be fair to what you're reviewing. Like because that's also fair to your viewers. If you're not fair, then what are you doing? Like, why are you calling it? You could just call it an opinion video at that point, I guess.
Yeah. That's fair too. Yeah. So you're at the point now, man, where you're closing in on 800,000 subs, which, is obviously wild. One of the biggest channels out there. Is that surreal to you? Like, what's that feel like when you reflect on it now, a few years later or several years later?
It shows that I didn't succeed. I had a bad 2 years, man. Technically, nothing worked right for 2 solid years. I should be well over 1 million. This is just my own. I'm not saying egotistical. I'm saying that I feel like I messed up. Things didn't go right. Games didn't come in. I got a lot of game companies that were a little hedgy on working with me because, well, at least I think, because I do cuss. That came up with Sony a lot.
Sure.
And I've been asked by companies, hey, man, can you not drop a Peter North joke in the middle of this video? And I'll be like, absolutely. Now I actually state that. I think it's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. Like to say, hey, man, we want everybody to see this. Can you? So I had 2 bad years. So for example, some games I would have a technical issue with that just made it so I couldn't even review it. I mean, I could have said it crashed right away. Don't get it. But that's not the same thing. And like World War II, Call of Duty, I remember boots on the ground kind of game, and it just didn't work. Cyberpunk, I know that they were nervous about me because they reached out to me a year earlier, and we were like, we want you to be a premier reviewer. We're going to blah, blah, blah. And then that contact disappeared.
Really?
And I was like, that's weird. And there was a lot of hedginess. And I was like, what is going on? And then it dawned on me when I started hearing rumors. I was like, oh, shit. They don't want me to just absolutely hammer this. Because I would have absolutely hammered. I did when I did my review. But I was, So, I had 2 bad years. It's surreal. It's awesome. And I don't take it for granted. But I do look at some mistakes I made and some like hardware issues where I didn't have backups for certain things. I lost a hard drive, which had every single thing on it and had to pay a clean room to pull the parts because I was not smart enough to back up my software like a fucking idiot. Like, that's what I tell everybody. Pay $5, back up everything you've got. If you're a YouTuber, back up every thumbnail, back up every software program you've got, because if you don't, you're going to be like me, and review won't be possible because your shit's in the dumpster.
Man, that's a nightmare scenario.
It is. It's cool, but it's weird to see the views drop on these. No one's getting good. Even IGN, today's videos that went up for Weird West, I don't know if you saw that, but they're at like 50,000, which 50,000 was an hour. The first hour usually of smaller games a year or 2 ago. And talking to every reviewer, that is what's going on. There's a lot of chaff, a lot of people looking at one. There's Game Pass, which I think is amazing. But with Game Pass, that means a person may not need to even look at a review.
Yeah, they just play it. Yeah.
And just play it, which is why I've started to shift and start doing impressions and previews, because when you combine those two, they do equal the old numbers. That's what I've been doing, is a preview and then the review, and they usually equal the review numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting. Weird West, by the way, man. I'm reviewing it as well. I'm not further enough to publish a review yet, in my opinion, but man, I'm enjoying the hell out of it. I saw you really enjoyed it too.
Dude, that game, everybody I know, well, there's been a couple like who really hated it, but I have a reviewer Discord where there's like about 19 or 20 different reviewers in there. We all do, because you've got friends. But I just sat and read this transcript of things people did in that game that I had not done. And I tested shit. Like, I would sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to do this. Will that affect this? Yes, it does. No, this doesn't. Yes, this does. No, this. And I went in there and I was just like, Rigged for Epic did a review and I read his. PC Gamer did a review and I read theirs. PC Gamer had something at the last 2 or 3 paragraphs. It's a pretty short review, unfortunately, but it does have something that I hadn't thought of. And I was like, holy crap, that worked. That to me is the absolute heart of an immersive like sim like this.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, it feels like Prey all over again. Not
Yes.
not as polished as Prey, because Prey I think looked better, but still, man, so good.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it. And good shout out to Prey, man. One of my absolute favorites.
Yeah,
incredible game. So yeah, you've mentioned a few times now around kind of YouTube now, 2022 content creation. That landscape is drastically different now than it was even, like we said, a few years ago. I mean, what you mentioned earlier around if you were going to get into it now, you probably wouldn't. Like if you were starting fresh right now, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just such a challenge right now. Do you think how does that get better? I don't see it getting any better, right? It just seems like every day there's more and more channels and more buzz and kind of noise, as you said, spread across so thin. It makes it very, very challenging for smaller channels to really kind of break through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if people don't know like what something can happen, no, nothing against these guys because this is their right and they should be able to do it and they do it smart. But for example, a review that comes out, usually IGN has 7 to 8 videos about that game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called channel stuffing, but there's nothing actually they have that many people, but that's what becomes difficult because they used to not do that. Now they're like preview first, this first, 10 things, this, blah, blah, blah. And so it is very hard for somebody to look and get and shoot the gap, which again is sort of where I came from. It was a job where you're always looking at not only strengths, but you're looking at the inverse. Like you look at somebody's strength and you're like, are they really strong there? Or do we have the ability to like be seen in this spot? Or do we have the ability to be, or is there something no one's covering? I'm not going to give away a couple secrets because I am changing. I'm not changing. I'm adding stuff to the channel. I never really remove anything. There are some gaps, but dude, they're not very big.
Yeah.
And production's hard. And dude, so I'm sure you know this, but I've got a couple friends who are PR at smaller companies. Now bigger companies, they move around a lot. That's another thing. Don't piss off a PR person because they move all the time. Yeah. And so one of them, they told me that in one of the reasons why they don't tell everybody you've got a code or why they don't want everybody to know you've got a code is because if I post Carrick got a code, they will have 600 emails on top of the 1,200 one single person has.
Yeah.
And that's why you have Rainmaker and some other places for you to apply for codes. But guess what? Those still do the same thing. All they're doing is tiering you now and putting you in tiers that the PR person can see. And so getting codes is also harder. So what I would say if a newcomer's coming in, I'm starting to do it. I'm going to continue re-reviewing after a patch. You know, covering what a patch does. We do it on the podcast every Friday now. We have a huge updates section where Absy is just like, these are the top 10 games that got substantial updates this week. And by the way, 10 is a hard parse down from 100.
Sure.
Like, right? Like you, and sometimes it'll be like, there weren't many. And I'll be like, no, there were many. He's just doesn't want to admit that like we had to parse these down because they were huge. So I think somebody could shoot the gap there. You can shoot the gap on if a game patches and ruins itself. There's ways there, but yeah, it's hard, man, for a newcomer. Like I've tried to help people that are so skilled. For example, Skilled Media, that weird name, but Skilled Media, he was a guy I had on the channel a couple years ago. He left about 6 years ago, but he was in YouTube. He had every production thing nailed, everything, audio. You saw stuff and you were like, this guy's at least 7 years ahead of the game because he was doing that in his real life, but he could not get traction. Yeah. And I had him on the channel. I still talk to him, had him on the channel, all this stuff. And it was just like, dude, let's push this guy. I mean, it's like, I have no issue if he passes me. It's like, great, because dude, he's 10 times better than me on like his podcast couldn't, it just didn't work. So you can capture it on if you want to do drama, but then what if that dies? Or what if somebody comes after you? What if you say something these days that, you know, burns you in the long run? You got to watch out for that. And I don't even mean saying something risque. I mean, like, well, like I said, piss off a PR or do something like that where your access is removed. Luckily, when it comes to games, I don't see that very much. You hear some people that got blackballed. I know that because I was cussing, Sony didn't give me a couple until we talked about it. But I think that overall, a newcomer just getting your name on the board, that's why I just shout out people in review videos. I'll just be like, hey, here's a new Happy Console Gamer. I love his stuff.
Okay.
Writing on games is phenomenal. Seamus, he doesn't do a lot. He has a lot of angst around YouTube and difficulty there, but his stuff is next level. Dude, he broke down Hitman 3, and he breaks it down not in that, I don't know how to describe it, but in a lore gamer's way where you're like, and then there's 4 of these symbols. You're like, oh my fucking God, I'm going to die. Seamus, man, just anybody listening, writing on games. I am telling you right now, this guy, he's only been on the podcast once or twice. It's not like we're high-fiving and he's given me an affiliate link. The dude is that good. And my Discord, I swear to God, half the time they love him more than me. He broke down Hitman 3 levels by level, but he didn't break it down in the way, he didn't break it down in a way that it was a little bit like a walking the walk where there's still emotion in it. And he was talking one time about how he was doing stealth, but he was under like this staircase. He started to feel like this god, but it's well written. He's very well spoken. But the way he did it, I don't watch YouTube. I just don't. I almost never watch YouTube unless I'm watching news, not news, but information videos and stuff.
Sure.
And I was just like, what the fuck? The entire time he talked, I've watched everything of his. So that's my shout out. Writing on games. He's just, dude, he's criminally small when it comes to the YouTube space. He is phenomenal.
That's what's so sad to see, is when you do see those creators who really have the knowledge and the heart and put it in, and they just, to your point, they get no traction.
I don't know if it's SEO or what. Maybe writing on games is not a good name. I think it's a perfect name.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Angry Centaur Gaming's not a fucking good name. That's a role playing. It was a D&D name. I didn't know it was going to be a YouTube channel in that way. So he did. Yeah. So I agree with you. I don't know what happens. It's just YouTube, man.
It is. It's funny when I was talking to, I did one of these with Jez like several months ago, right? And he just pointed out the most simple statement, which is so true. Yet, it's just so simple, is that Google, between their search engine and between YouTube, they pretty much control whether your site or channel lives or dies. It's just, that's the nature of it. And it's kind of scary to think about, right? Like for me, because season gaming is kind of this thing I do as a passion project, right? And the channel and everything, and I have this separate career over here. If season gaming were to die tomorrow, obviously I'd be, kind of heartbroken, if you will, but it doesn't affect me financially or personally. Whereas, people who make their living off of it, it's got to be wild to think that one little algorithm change, one little SEO change, and your revenue's cut by 40%. It's like, it's crazy to live in a world where that can happen today, because it's very non-traditional, right? It's got no relation to how careers have worked forever.
I think the only correlation I've ever made, I believe I was on co-optional on my second or third time with Toto Biscuit, where I was like, the only way I could describe a connection is when a TV show would move to a different night and it would bomb. And that's the only correlation I can really say is in any way like where you can talk about it and say it's sort of like this, where a good thing moves and its demographic is no longer represented there. It's not. And the show may be doing really well, but they move it for whatever reason. Maybe they have a new show and suddenly it's not there. That is SEO, man. SEO just decides it's not there. And the thing that sucks is right now there's AI. AI does SEO. Then there's AI bots to fight SEO. Then there's some very good plugins you can get that'll tell you what SEO might work. But what they're not realizing is that, like for a review, I'm doing that prior to the review coming out. The moment the review comes out, the SEO completely changes to something else. For example, if there's bugs in a game, but I don't have bugs written in my SEO tags, and the bug videos go higher. It's just all this weird stuff. And then if you don't have a website, I just started mine, because websites are pretty important too. If you don't have a website, that makes it harder. I have a very good Discord and a very good Patreon. So YouTube demonetized me, and I was in dire straits. And so I did one video, and I woke up and I was like, should I do this video? And I'm very like antagonistic about that stuff. And I just sat there in bed and I was like, listen, man, I haven't ever asked anybody for anything. I'm going to do this video and just say, if Patreon doesn't work out, I probably can't do this because YouTube is not working out. And so my Patreon ballooned because of that. And if I had not, that also would have meant I probably wouldn't be here. So what I tell people is to try to switch everywhere. So Twitch, try Twitch. YouTube, try YouTube. Hey, if you want to do TikTok, try that. If you want to do Instagram, try that. Try them all. You may catch on in a place you didn't think you'd catch on. But you have to, that's sort of shooting the gap now. Isn't shooting the gap just on YouTube. You have to pretty much make it so that when something happens and the algorithm looks at like Weird West, it sees ACG's dropped a website review, ACG's done this, there's an Instagram post, and those social signals, as they call it, instead of people watching, which is weird.
It is.
It's backwards, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah. It's and it's exhausting to think about, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like there's no solution. It's not I mean, at the end of the day, it probably is a mathematical equation, but you know what I mean? It's not a 1 + 1 = 2 type thing. It's just ever evolving and changing, and it's almost impossible to keep up with. It just
And YouTube destroys a lot of things too. Like YouTube used to have you able to do annotations in the video, which was phenomenal. So if a new video popped up where I had to change a review, I could be like, boom, annotation in the old video, moving to the new video. You're set. You're done. You can't even do the basic stuff you used to be able to do. Their editor is terrible, and I get it. They don't want people fully editing videos. That makes full sense. Do you know how much CPU power that is? It's ridiculous. But you get in there and you try to like nip out something you said that sounds stupid or that didn't work out or that was wrong even. And you're like, I don't want to re-upload everything, so I'm going to, try to figure this out. They have ruined they're wildly anti-creator. It is so weird. Like they did the thing. They're like, no thumbs down, man. We don't want people feeling bad. And I'm like, bitch, if that were true, then when I logged into my dashboard, it wouldn't tell me this video is performing poorly.
Right.
It flashes in front of you that it's performing. So if you're trying to, it does. It's so, they're such liars. And they are. I mean, admittedly, they're a business. They can lie. That is the way it is. They are complete liars. But they will tell you something is done when you really know big industry didn't want their new trailer getting review bombed. That's exactly what it was. And so they didn't want those social signals. They didn't want me able to hire a bot either, which makes perfect sense to thumbs down the new Transformers movie. So they removed that. But that's one problem with a lie. You should just say we're doing it because we don't want review bombing or whatever, and then just be done. But instead they were like, we want people to feel better about themselves, and then they splash that. And you're like, all right, you just got caught. Sometimes the best way is to just be like, we made some changes. Peace out. And just walk away. Drop the mic, because otherwise you're going to sound like a jackass.
Yeah, it's you're right. And the funny thing you just said, right, is we're talking about YouTube, as we said, which is like hundreds of millions of hours of video footage uploaded every single day, right?
Single day.
Like their server farms, right? And their Google's cloud architecture and everything that goes into supporting Google search and engine and YouTube and all these things is absurd, right? But what we're saying is that of all these hundreds of millions of creators and videos and everything, really at the heart of the day, Google doesn't do a good job of supporting them. Which is kind of a bizarre statement to make, right? The two seem at odds with one another.
Yeah, and they remove, like I said, it's the removal features that has always seemed weird, like the verified thumb. They tried. I was one of the first to get removed. Yong Yi was nice enough to do. He DM'd me. He's like, dude, you got your green check mark removed, and I was like, yeah, man. And I said, some review companies have told me, some PR companies have said we do look for that. And so he did a video, a couple people did a video, and they reversed that. One of the few things YouTube has reversed. But on the other side, YouTube has removed so many tools for new creators, so many different, like I said, the annotations, all this stuff. You can get some of it back with some there's some software you can buy. It has to see your YouTube channel, but they're legit companies that'll tell you some stuff, help you with thumbnails, help you with A/B testing. But YouTube doesn't. And that's what's just so phenomenally weird about YouTube, is that it's almost like it's just weird. It's just weird. It doesn't, and I'm not even talking about the SEO. I'm talking about that. We know that. I'm saying behind the scenes, those changes they've made it harder, it is just really odd to me. And I don't think there'll ever be a switch. That's why I tell people, like I said, check everything. If you want to do, check Instagram. Try to make an Instagram account. If you're trying to do videos on YouTube, you still need to share it other places because that can actually have an impact. Especially like when you look at Facebook being bought by, or Instagram being bought by Facebook, it only makes sense that you want to make sure your stuff's there because that's two major groups. You may hit big on Facebook, you may hit big on Instagram. One's for old people, one's for younger. But you need to be there.
Yeah, it's wild nowadays, man. It is.
What's that big? Is that a plushie controller behind you?
Yeah, man.
That's pretty sweet.
This is my Xbox One Ideate Xbox controller.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, dude.
I just realized I thought it was a sign the entire time.
No, it's a pillow. It's so when I went to E3 in 2018, which was my first E3, I had some interviews because we were super small, right? So I couldn't have any of the big companies or anything, but they had an Ideate Xbox kind of floor in the Xbox area, and there were all these Ideate Xbox groups or small developers that were talking about their games. Tunic was there, Below was there, et cetera, et cetera. And I did some interviews with those guys, talked to a bunch of people, and then I met one of the Ideate Xbox guys, not Charla, but one of the people. And he basically said you could have a skateboard deck. Remember they do those Ideate Xbox skateboard decks every year? They do one. So you could have that, or you can have the Ideate controller pillow. And I almost regret it. I kind of want the skateboard deck now, but the funny thing is, I didn't have anywhere to put it because you're walking around the damn convention center all day, right?
Yeah,
with your pillow. Right. So I have this thing like in my backpack under my arm and stuff. And I had so many people, even people that work at Xbox, come up and say, "How did you get that? I've never been able to get one of those." Oh, so cool. It's pretty funny.
So
it's just
you got the collectible that you didn't know was going to be a collectible.
Exactly. So now I just kind of have it sitting around the room. It's cool.
Did you like? What did you think about E3? I mean, ignoring the interview part, or we can talk about that too. But did you like your time at E3? Did you?
I did. I really enjoyed it because it's a spectacle. First of all, right? It's just crazy. But it's something that I always read about since I was a kid, right? It's like going to E3 was like the dream, you know what I mean? Yep. So just getting to walk around the convention center, you know, the guy that I was traveling with, Bert, who I used to run the channel with, he was a little less on it, but I was like, dude, we're hanging out. There's video games everywhere. We're meeting a bunch of good people. Like I'm drinking, I'm having food. Like what's not to love, man? I loved it.
Yeah, I had a good time. I did GDCs, and I've had, I probably would never do E3 just because of the way it's set up, and nothing against it. But PAXs, they were fun. I always got sick. I got PAX pox every time.
It is a mess. Yeah,
it's a mess. It's a sickening miasma. It is just nothing more than a bacteria generator. I don't get sick ever. Like I haven't been sick in years. And I went with my friend Cadiz. He was on the channel with me. We went, I came home, and admittedly, it was the best sleep I'd ever had in probably 20 years. I mean, it was that good sleep, restorative, which I just don't usually feel. But it was 2 weeks of it. I mean, it was mono. I've never, and I didn't get like super bad cold or anything like that. I was just, my body was like, what the fuck? Karate chop, all this shit coming in. I was so messed up. So we waited like 2 years, and we're like, dude, PAX Prime in the West, should we go? And I'm like, you know what? It's nearby. It's like 8-hour drive. I'm like, let's go up there. Let's just enjoy it. We go up, and we felt awesome, and we got done early, and we were like, let's drive home a day early and just hang out. And thank God we did, because the next day I was so sick. There's no chance. There's zero chance. I mean, and I'm not saying, this is not hyperbole. It sounds a little bit like COVID in my symptoms. It was the most exhausting time I've ever had. I mean, and I'm not one of those guys that gets tired around people, and I am sort of a extrovert, so I don't have issues with that. It wasn't like psychologically tired. It was that my body was like, holy shit, this is school ground bacteria. The kind that kids, where they're just throwing snot at each other, mixing it up, eating it, and you're like, oh, Jesus, they're out there eating dirt, and you're like, we're all gonna die. That's what was at PAX Prime. It was, and dude, I was talking to people, and I'm like, were you sick? They weren't DMing me back. It took a week before they were like, sorry, man, I could barely reach. Barely reach my keyboard. I had to get a cane, and I'm like, it fucked up your hip. What? Yeah, it was messy. So you didn't get sick at your E3?
No,
Continue talking. I'm just gonna grab something.
No, you're good, man. And I don't know how, because I used to be almost the opposite. I would get sick like every 6 months, like decently sick every 6 months. But no, it was exhausting. I can tell you that, especially if you're at these shows to have cover it, right? Like trying to do interviews and get footage and then work on it, upload it that night. Like there's a hilarious picture of me and Bert like in our hotel room. It's like 4 a.m. and we're both hunched over laptops, just looking like, we've been beaten on for days.
Yeah, like the burrito ate you. It's just wrapped up. And you're like, oh, fuck. Yeah. It's funny because that also happens in reviews. Well, this doesn't happen too much because sorry, I'm clipping my fingernails. I'm trying to learn the guitar, and I was trying to decide the difference between plucking and finger strumming. And then I looked at them, and I was like, this is nasty. I'm very much an overshare. When you teach martial arts, you get used to somebody being like, dude, you stink. Or you didn't clip your fingernails, you just cut me. So I just say this shit. But so when it comes to like going to those events, doing the work afterwards, that was tough. I have noticed sometimes in reviews it can get tough when like you'll get too big reviews, or you'll get a game that for whatever reason, like you've got an idea of what you want to say about it. You're getting ready to say something, and then the PR people, and this has happened a couple times now, they move the embargo a day early. And this has happened in the last year like 6 or 7 times where I'm like, all right, man, I know my exact schedule. And they're all, because of the blah, 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 we're going to move this to Tuesday instead of Wednesday. And you're like, no, because you want to be on time, obviously.
Yeah. If you miss that launch, it's a huge
It can be
hit.
rough.
Yeah,
it can be,
huge hit.
It can be rough. Sometimes if you don't, your best bet is to hit it like on the day the game comes out. So like and this is a good advice for somebody who's going to try to do this. If you have a 2-day early embargo and you're not going to make it, but the game is coming out, then hit it like 3 or 4 hours before the game comes out. And it probably won't be the same, but there's actually a very high chance you'll do well because people will also be looking online for new data and your video might come up.
Yeah, they've got that excitement about it getting ready to launch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly right. So let me ask you this. I haven't asked you this. What is your favorite game of all time?
I mean, it used to be KOTOR.
Okay.
I've probably played KOTOR well over 100 times.
Really, that much? Wow.
Dude, I played KOTOR 3 times in a row with no delay. As in, I beat it and I literally hit start and started a new character.
Such a great game.
When I like a game and I like choice and I just like the music and all that stuff, I can play it again. Space Harrier from Sega is pretty fucking sweet. I'm definitely old style when it comes to that Afterburner, the older ones.
Man.
Ghouls and Ghosts is pretty good. I would say you can tell I probably don't have one because I rarely do top 10 lists that are solidified. I'll do, here's 10 games to look forward to, but I don't believe there's a best RPG.
Yeah.
Right? So when it comes to games, I would just say that those high ones are like some of the old style ones. And then, of course, KOTOR. And then like Disco Elysium is really high, and then Oxenfree is very high. Oxenfree is a phenomenal game. I mean, it's like that game is stunning, and that's probably it.
It's funny you mentioned disco because I was getting some disco vibes of Weird West.
I saw some people saying the same thing. I didn't because because the narrative is so short in Weird West, which is a positive, right? Because they have a tendency to ramble in disco.
They do.
Right?
Yeah.
They'll be like, and then the sharks came out, but they weren't sharks, they were spirits. And you're like, what's happening? What's happening? It's like jumping into somebody's D&D game where everybody knows the lore and you don't. And they're like, no, dude, that's not a dragon. That's Tiamat. And you're like, listen, nerd, this is what are you talking about? Dude, Disco Elysium, I had to play twice because the first time, a lot of the thought process and stuff were just not, because a lot of it was like there was the communism stuff, there was fascism stuff, which is great. I love to learn that stuff. But it's like I couldn't grasp all of it in one go. I was just like, there's a lot in this game. But Weird West had some of that. But it had some. I don't know. I think it's because they both also chose a weird art style.
Yeah. It's a much more filtered experience in that vein than that. But that's funny you mentioned it. We're talking about old games, man. You mentioned Afterburner and was it the Sega podcast? Maybe it was the Sega roundtable that me and you were on together. Because I know I'm an old school Sega guy. Cog is, a bunch of guys over there are old Sega guys, man. And we have this kind of old school camaraderie and brotherhood when it comes to Sega.
Well, Sega was the down and out, and I think that everybody like who had one felt like the unique special kid on the block, because Sega had a couple good gens. They just weren't spectacular gens. But like the Genesis was awesome. I was a Master System fan. So
I was a Master System kid. Yep.
I remember finding the little snail game on the system if you turned it on without a game, and just all that kind. And that to me was phenomenal. Or the Sega CD had the spaceship that would fly around if you put a music CD in, and it would just play music as like a really crappy spectrograph kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, Sega. I like all the systems to an extent, but Sega at the time just had something in some of their games that spoke to me in a way that Nintendo didn't. It might have been because I'm not a huge JRPG fan. I like some, but they don't. I can see where if you did gravitate towards those, even action games were trying to have that, bits of that, because those were popular, and those sort of sank on Nintendo's side. And so I had them, but I never really grasped onto them. But Sega Genesis was like, dude, every game on that it wasn't good, but it feels like every game on the system was good. Nostalgia can be a hell of a drug.
Of course, yeah, man. Amazing times. Some of my favorite times in gaming, especially the 16-bit era, man. God, that's hilarious, though. But what's next for you, man? Are you, as you look out, and we've talked a lot around what content creation is like nowadays and YouTube and everything. As you kind of look out, do you have this? You said earlier you don't really think about this kind of long-term plan, but is there anything you're kind of driving towards or wanting to achieve with your channel and content in the coming years?
I guess in the way I should say, I didn't think about the long-term plan when I started. I do now, and I started to look at, like I said, shooting the gaps and stuff. But is there anything? No, because like as games get more detailed or whatever, I like to cover that kind of stuff. So there'll be like the anti-NFT battle that we all have to fight. I don't even. It's weird because it really depends on where games go. Because like let's say there's a huge MMO like Ark came. Ark was pretty crazy. Ark is phenomenal, by the way, and I don't even play those games. I don't even like that game, but I know it's phenomenal. I don't need to be a fan to go, that game is utterly phenomenal. And I know how it was created, that it was an old game from somewhere else. That's why it's got all the content. It doesn't matter. That's changed, and it's raised the bar for current MMOs. And that's what I don't think people realize is people see like a Legend of Zelda and they're like, well, every game now needs to have lightning that's conductive, or that armor that's conductive, and you need to have to take it off. And I'm like, nah, it's not exactly how it works. There's other more overarching things and successes that come about. And I think that Lost Ark is going to push like MMOs to do stuff that currently MMOs are known as early access, but not called early access, but they are.
Right.
I call them shit access. I hate early access. I'm sorry, I know people like it, but I think early access is a quagmire of bad PR, terrible coverage. You can't cover it and say this is the way it'll be, because it may not be that way.
Right.
Entire things may change. So Lost Ark's come in, and it's really redefined a bunch of stuff. Elden Ring, I don't think is redefined as much as people think, because I think everybody felt that that's sort of where they were going to go. But other companies look at that stuff and go, okay, this sounds like a good idea. Maybe we'll make our combat a little bit harder, but not super hard. Just like From Software's looked at every other game and said, maybe our combat, or maybe we need an overworld.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of people think that like From Software is a bunch of guys with bullet helmets on running forward through gaming, being like, we lead, you follow. No, they look at other games too.
Of course.
That's why we now have Elden Ring, which is what should happen. So like Lost Ark comes in and it does this weird shit. I can't wait to see like what MMOs are going to do to say, man, we need content, and it has to be good, because it's not like it's all procedurally generated. These guys, and they have microtransactions, but the reason why you're not hearing about a bunch of it is because like Reg on our channel has 120 hours in that game, and all he bought was the founders, the game. He basically he paid the $45 so he could play that week early. That was it. He's got, dude, people are cramping in like 1,000 hours now, and you're just like, already. So that's raised the game. We're going to see, whatever's coming out from Sony and Microsoft, they're raising the bar. My channel will change on those things. So like if it's online, then I have to look at streaming and go, what technologies, where do they need to be, so that I can review it and say it's good versus bad. leg versus no leg, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't have a plan in any other way than to just keep my ear to the ground and go like, oh, this is happening, that's happening. I do think we need a competitor in YouTube space, but it'll never happen.
Yes. I know.
It just, and if it does happen, it's going to be one of those things like Discord, where it won't just be like it won't just be video. Discord succeeded because it had all these other things, and then it started putting more and more in and stuff like that. Discord's a true success story, but I just don't see YouTube doing it.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody looking and saying, let's upload, what do they have? Exobytes, right? I think that's the larger of that's larger than terabytes. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they have exobytes worth of data. It's like, does anybody else really want to try that on? What are they going to, we've seen some small ones come on, but they've never done great.
No. I mean, who's going to compete in that space? And it doubled down, like we said, with Google owning the search engine as well. You know what I mean? It's like they've got a monopoly on that.
Dude, I don't even know what we're going to do. I mean, that's what's weird is and then you get these channels who do, like an IGN who has, state channels in other places like Italy, IGN, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you compete against that? As they get bigger, there's more money. Then those corporations can it's weird. And the SEO becomes this thing, which is an impenetrable sort of beast, unless you break it by doing what I consider to be things that I won't do. As in like drama stuff or what you could probably do that, but then YouTube, who knows where their rules are going? That's another thing. I drop cuss words in a lot of my videos. As AI gets better at identifying what somebody's saying, is YouTube just going to be anti-censor, where they're just like, okay, we'll cut out the Peter North joke. It'll just be some elevator music playing when Carrick talks. Like, I have no clue what's happening. It sucks.
It's kind of scary, the level of power there, right? It's
well, it's not even, I mean, is it power when there's no comparison to anybody else, or is that just it's not even a power, like there isn't a power meter. It's not like you're fighting Super Saiyan. You're going in and it's the world versus everybody else. I mean, there is no power meter for them because they control the search engine as well. So it's just like there's no I mean, Russia split off their internet. I don't know if you heard, but like years and years ago, Vladimir, prior to all this, was like, hey, let's split off our internet. We don't want it controlled. And, we want to be able to shut it off and stop, fake news, all this kind of stuff. And that would almost be the only way a Google competitor would be, like a DuckDuckGo, which doesn't do supposedly they don't track.
Right.
Like maybe they could do a thing where they're like, this is true video. You know what, though? DuckDuckGo does do that, don't they? So if I go to DuckDuckGo and I search a review, that would be a place where it's not taking in. It's still doing SEO. Is it doing SEO? Yeah, it's still doing SEO.
It's going to have to do SEO, yeah. It just won't factor into the same algorithm maybe that Google uses. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess. It's a much bigger conversation than us. That's for damn sure. But man, it's been a lot of fun chatting with you today, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Is
that it? Did we already go an hour?
Yeah, we're at an hour 17 as we're talking.
All right, cool.
You got a topic you want to bring up?
Yeah, let me bring up a topic.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you watch movies, TV shows?
I don't read a lot. The only thing I really read are kind of online articles or magazines. I don't read a lot of books. I do watch TV shows, movies. Me and my wife. My wife's not a gamer, so a lot of the content I consume outside of gaming is TVs and movies that we watch together. You know what I mean?
Right.
Why?
I was just gonna say, what's your favorite? So, yes, I'm a YouTuber, but like I have so many things I do outside of YouTube.
Yeah.
Draw, write, study, teach.
Yeah.
What's your big thing outside of YouTube? I mean, not your job. Can't be your job.
Sure. No. Outside of gaming, got a couple things. So you talked about martial arts. So I am into fitness, working out, and I play ice hockey. So big love hockey. Been doing that my whole life. I just got back on the ice because I broke my ribs for the second time in January, which happens, and But yeah, man, do that. And then my other passion, actually, I talk about rarely, is cars. I'm into cars.
So are we talking classic Dodge Dart 1970 swingers? Or are we talking current cars?
Little mix. So my dad was a car collector and a race car driver.
Mm.
And so I grew up at the track. I grew up around a lot of cars, mostly European because my dad's English. My family's
Hmm.
English.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
Okay.
so mostly, German stuff, that type of stuff. So I grew up around all that. So I've been, I actually adminned a M3, BMW M3 forum for a while. And I have a couple M3s and I don't really race anymore, but I still kind of love it, if that makes sense.
Our racetrack here opens up for the insurance day where you pay insurance and you can take your car out on
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Those are a blast. Those are
Yeah,
a
man.
blast. I mean,
Yeah.
they're a blast unless somebody crashes, but they're a blast to see those kind of things. Yeah, I'm always interested because I do feel that those have a tendency sometimes to leak over into what you create.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes whether it's because specific ways in which cars are built, so you might know what goes into some other product or whatever. So I'm always
But
interested in knowing.
it's funny because that came out recently with Gran Turismo 7.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I started writing
True.
an article about it, right? And obviously all the press has been around the damn microtransactions and earning. And I'm literally, I have the article half written. I haven't published it. I'm waiting for their update in early April. But really, it's going to be like an honest look at Gran Turismo from a perspective of someone who knows cars and has raced, right? And what this is for that community, because
Yeah.
that's what Gran Turismo is supposed to be about, right?
Yeah.
It's not really interested in, sure, there's some problems with content delivery and other stuff that I'm going to talk about, but I wanted to look at it from a perspective of this car is aimed at being a love affair for the automobile, right? For cars. They make that exceedingly clear in that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're coming from that perspective and you have that shared love, what is the game like then? And it's a different perspective.
Yeah, and I definitely, I think it's a needed one, especially because microtransactions do suck, but they absolutely do. But there is a time where somebody says, "All right, I know that part.
Yeah.
What about the other?" And that's one of the reasons why, like, when I put my review, I was like, okay, because I did a review in progress on that one. And I'm like, okay, microtransactions are really high. I'm gonna finish a review when I'm finished playing it. And then it was offline when I was trying to play it, when I had open time, I couldn't get on. But even in my review, that's another thing I talked about, was that you can tell that game starts with that long ass elevator music and car video. And
Yep.
you're just, unless you know what they're doing, you're going to be like, what is this game?
It's like 8 minutes long.
Dude, it's the start. I was just like, what? And then you go into the cafe and you're like, cafe, here's your menu with your cars. You can't, that's so pinky fucking up. It's bent backwards. Like, that's crazy.
It's about as pretentious as you can be about the car.
It is as pretentious. I mean, and we want the cars to be the real price, so we have to figure that out. But all that being said, what I actually enjoyed a lot of the racing. Like, I thought the AI did a pretty good job. It's not the new AI they've talked about. I think everybody thought all that was going to be like injected into the game.
Yeah.
But it's its own thing, man. It's its own. I mean, any game that makes you pass licenses to continue playing through the single player campaign is a game that is not dramatically not the same as any other game. And people knew that. I saw people posting about that years ago when the game was first announced. They're like, "Oh God, licenses." It's like, well, that's their thing. That is their thing. And I think it does a lot of stuff really, really well, but it's pretty dry, man.
It is.
It's like Flight Sim. I love Flight Sim, but if I told somebody, "Hey man, we're going to get into a plane, climb to 40,000 feet and do nothing for 3 hours and then land," a lot of people would be like, "You're out of your fucking mind. I'm not doing that in a game."
All right.
But the people who are into those things think that flipping a switch and calling and slightly changing your course is the shit, right?
Exactly.
I have a friend who's into train simulators, and I'm like, dude, it's forward and stop. That's it. You barely back up. What are we doing? And he's like got, $1,000 worth of trains, and he's like, I love it. It feels perfect. When you slow down, I'm like, feels perfect. What does it feel like? It takes like 16 hours for you to stop. Why are you? But to him, that and admittedly, he thinks it matched perfect. I don't know that many people who are able to just get behind the rods of a train and start being a pilot for one. But it's still very cool to see. I think it's awesome that we have it too. Like, I would never behoove GT being what it is. Yeah. Because that's what it is. It's not grid.
Yes, exactly.
And that it's not supposed to be. A lot of people get pissy and they'll be like, well, it doesn't have this or doesn't have that. I'm like, dude, I don't think that was do you think the plan was for the car to have a turbo boost and go on fire and for a second? No, it's GT.
That's yeah.
They're not aiming for that.
It goes back exactly to what we say when you're kind of providing a critical look at a game, right? You have to have perspective of what the developer is looking to achieve, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think we're fortunately in a place. There was a time when we were growing up, and you want to go way back to something like Pole Position or those games where there was a racing game. That's the racing game you played, and then Outrun came out, right? And Outrun was like the new hot thing. Nowadays, we're fortunate enough to be in an industry where if you want your arcade racing like Grid or something like, you've got it. But that's not what Gran Turismo is supposed to be. So don't.
You know what else blew me away? You just reminded me of something. It's not my favorite game, but I gotta shout this out, even though it started bad. When I was a kid, No Man's Sky is what I wanted.
Yeah.
It is currently what I wanted. I'm not saying it was day one, but it still day one was beyond any of my wildest dreams as a child hoping for a space game. I remember sitting with Cadiz because he knows me, and we remember the conversations we had. We're like, imagine if you can get in a spaceship and land. Oh my God, what if you could land on space stations? No way, that's not possible. Because back then, graphics engines couldn't even let you get out of the car. You had a racing game and a running game because graphics engines couldn't do both. And the idea of No Man's Sky is everything as a child. I've always been into space fighter stuff. Huge fan of old 1980s like space fight. You know,
did you like Wing Commander?
Wing Commander. Last Starfighter is more my thing. But any of those, I'll watch. I'll for sure watch once. I'll give it a chance. Battlestar Galactica. I love the space stuff.
Yeah.
No Man's Sky, above almost any other game that I can think of right now, is probably the most technically awe-inspiring game ever. Because, and as pure tech, looking at what they've done, and now multiplayer's in, and the fact that multiplayer was certainly not in day one, whatever they were saying, whatever was going on, but the idea that you can get together, mechs, underwater cities, if you take a step back and, like you said, ignore the microtransactions, in a way you have to ignore No Man. We know it started like shit. We do.
Yeah.
And you can hold that like a dwarf in a book of woe and write down that you hate them forever. That's fine. But if you take a step back and look at No Man's Sky, I played Elite when I was a kid, wireframe graphics, Apple IIe.
Yep.
And you couldn't do any. You'd go to a planet and you'd just be like, okay, you'd read some numbers and you'd be like, next planet. And now we're landing, digging underground, building things that stay there forever for a different group of people to maybe see, because sometimes people don't even go to the same planets ever.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. Yeah.
It's nuts.
Good time to be alive.
Well, what was that game on, speaking of space, the game I always remember, I don't know if you remember this one. It was on PC at the time. It later came to Xbox as a port, but it was a space game where you could go to other planets and mine them and kind of drive your little ship around.
Star Control 1, 2, and 3, Starflight 1 and 2. Starflight 2 was also Sega Genesis. But it was third person when you landed. You landed on the planet with like a little truck that drove around and you could dig and dive. That's Starflight. Yeah.
Is that the one that had do you remember it had a wheel? A little code wheel that came with it that you had to
you mean
put in?
to hack the, so you knew you weren't
exactly
the piracy. Yeah. Dude, those, I mean, and that's the thing, like even those were ahead of their time, but they had to mimic the 2D screen as a 2D planet because they couldn't do both engines. And then you saw GTA. I still remember like the first time you saw GTA, you get out of a car and you beat somebody at the bat and you get back in your car and you're like, oh, we're there. Or at least you're like, we're close. And now we're seeing stuff that is just, that's why I'm so excited for gaming. I can be mad at a game. I can be mad at something that happens with YouTube, but then afterwards I'm like, if I want, I can jump into No Man's Sky, a game that I don't have to pay a subscription for. Even if I did, I'd be fine. But I can jump into that. I can go to other worlds and have entire bulletin boards that people are on, entire forums that people are on. Did you see the stuff for Elite Dangerous? Where
Elite Dangerous.
They have a gas station club. So if you run out of gas, you can like ask somebody to come and tow you. And I'm like, in real, what the is happening? Like that is meta. That is so meta. And the other game, what's the Eve
Online?
Eve, shit to play, amazing to read about. Eve is one of those games that is a spreadsheet, and you're like, dude, the making of that spreadsheet, I don't care. The stories afterwards, where they'll be like, the Terran Armada had 5,000 battles, and you see the battle at 1 FPS because they can't draw all the ships, but then somebody will tell you that like on forums, people were spies. people went over here and did this. And
Yeah.
you're just reading it going like, that is fucking nuts.
It's
And
wild.
It's
Yeah.
dude, that's why gaming should be exciting for everybody, regardless of any speed bumps. That kind of stuff exists now. And I usually tell people, if you're having a hard day, jump into that stuff and remind yourself of like just what you're playing. Because
Yeah.
it can be pretty phenomenal to be
Yeah.
doing that. It's phenomenal to play GT when, remember, old race car games couldn't have the licensed cars. And you'd
Yeah.
be playing a game where it's called like an Ord Esta instead of a Ford Fiesta. You'd be like, come on,
Well,
guys.
it's kind of like Outrun. It's the Ferrari Testarossa, right? But they can
Yo,
never say
God,
they
I
can.
forgot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they could never say that. You know,
Yeah,
everyone knew what it was, but
Suzuki instead of Suzuki. And you'd be like, dude, we know what this is. And remember when car companies were like, we don't want you crashing our cars.
yes.
And
yeah.
you're just, dude, it's a game. And they thought it was real. They were like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an awesome
Yeah.
time. Sorry, that was a tangent, but it's
No, but it is
pretty
interesting
exciting
to
time.
think. Yeah, when we were kids and you play these games and you could beat games in 30 minutes, right? Or 60 minutes,
Yeah.
whatever, right? And you just play them over and over and over again. And you had all these imaginations in your head or wildest dreams of what games could be.
Could be.
Yeah. And now we're at a place, as you just described, where literally you could play one game out of the hundreds of thousands that are currently being played, or however many there are. You can play one game and literally almost dedicate a portion of your life to it,
Yeah.
day in, day out, for months and years on end. And it's wild to think about. It really is.
It's exciting because like I do VR and I was doing Fallout 4. I had about 200 hours normal and I have about 1,500 hours in the VR version. Somebody asked me, they were like, why are you playing Fallout? First of all, I don't mind Fallout 4, but VR changes the entire way the game feels. It's a completely different game in VR. And one of the reasons is because it is immersive. It's like looking out your window at rain. That's one thing. But if you go outside, you're going to get wet. And that's the difference. That's what VR offers. And I was just playing this game going in even the first town you go into. I think it's called Providence, Independence. I can't remember, but it's the first town you go into in Fallout 4. I've seen this town 1,000 times. It means nothing. It's just storefronts. But if you go in VR, every storefront is like, whoa, what? And you leap through a window. And you're like, oh, shit, stuff might be in here. Stuff your brain is like, doesn't see on a 2D plane. And to me, VR is hugely awesome as well. It has its issues. But I've been seeing stuff in VR, dude. I don't know if you do VR much. There is stuff in VR that is slowly building its way up where it's like, shit.
Yeah.
I play D&D in VR that is amazing because, for example, VR chat lets you go into multiple rooms. People have made rooms that look like locations. And if you hotlink them, basically, you can say, okay, you can be a DM and say, there's been a murder, and you send everybody to a house. And now you're walking around in VR in a house that's built up, and you can say, see right there on the floor, there's a body there. And another person can be like, okay, I'm going to roll my dice. What do I see? And you can move around this spot. And it's not perfect. But what I'm saying is that to me is the next space where I'm starting to see VR do some stuff where you're like, oh shit, whether it be D&D, whether it be instant translate, because that's another thing. I'm talking to you. I don't know where you live. Are you East Coast?
Central. I'm outside of Kansas City.
All the people on my podcast are people that I would have had to have written a letter to when I was a kid, and it would have taken 2 weeks. And now they're sitting. So in VR chat, automatic Google Translate, the ability for you to walk up to somebody and be like, hello. And in the future, somebody will, different language, will be able to hear a computer voice, but you'll be able to talk to them. That expansion of, like, people think AI is cool. To me, communication between people of other nations and stuff, where now you can talk to somebody who's in Russia or whatever. You can talk. I have a girlfriend from Russia and from Ukraine, not two at the same time. That sounded weird. Obviously, they're having issues right now, but I know those issues because I'm talking to people from there.
Yeah.
And when I was talking to Johnny and Reg, you need to come on the podcast too so you can meet these guys. But Johnny, Reg, and Silver, it's like Sweden, Austria, and London. And then myself on the Pacific Northwest. And to get to talk to them and go, well, I've always heard this about you guys, about in London. What's that like? You couldn't do that before.
Yeah. And
that's one step where VR also with the automatic translation. I don't know if you saw it, but a guy used AI, GPT-3, and automatic translation. He made a small city block, and he just put some people in there. and he could talk to him about anything. So he could walk up to somebody and say, what are you doing? And the guy's like, get out of my way. I got to go to work. My boss hates me. And he walks off. All of it done via AI. No scripting, no nothing. Yeah. Dude, see, as you can tell, I could talk about this for 10 hours. This is where I get excited, is like, even more than YouTube stuff, is what the future can bring for gamers and some of the stuff we can see. Or differently abled gamers, getting shit from Microsoft where they're like, dude, let's just make a controller. You can just construct the blocks. You can Lego your own. I mean, to me, that's exciting because I have a lot of friends who are military, whatever, may not have full mobility of an arm. And now, do you follow Ginger Prime? Oh, I can't remember. Working the game, I think is what he's called.
No, I don't think so.
Well, if you don't, he does profiles, joystick profiles. And a lot of the ones that come up are, can you make a joystick profile for a one-hand game?
Okay.
Can you, so shortcut would be your trigger, blah, blah, blah. Can you do that? So all this stuff is stuff that just wasn't around, even 5-10 years ago, let alone 20 when I started.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Sorry. Longer tangent.
No, you touched on a lot there, man. And you touched on more of the gaming space in general and where it's going and being more kind of diverse and inclusive and all these things we hear about, but in a really unique and interesting way. And AI in general. So I do play around in that space as part of my career.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So I
you know more than I do then.
Yeah, I have some understanding of voice recognition and where AI is going. I've played with Google, et cetera. So, but it's funny, as we were having that conversation, we talked about the translation and possibility of interaction between that's been impossible, for forever. And it's all amazing. And it's just kind of funny. It hit me as we were talking. We came back to who? We came back to Google after the YouTube search engine. And
it's unfortunate, but I mean, and there's apps right now where you can put on your phone and go to France and be like, blah, 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 and play it. And to me, that war is always going to happen. And admittedly, I'm a violent person. So like, I do say some stuff that people are like, whoa, he's pretty violent. I don't like war though. That's just ridiculous. I do think that sometimes miscommunication and stuff is what causes it. The idea that, this group over here must do this. All Americans must be this way, right? And the idea to talk to somebody. I have a lot of long-haul truckers in my Discord. I'm not quite sure if that's because of the way I look. And I've got a lot of people from Australia.
Okay.
And to talk to them and find out, for example, their Christmas is summer.
Yeah.
And be like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, man, we just have a barbecue and some lobster. I'm like, on Christmas? What is happening? I just hadn't put two and two together. But the idea to talk and experience other people and what they want to do, and then what their ideas are for games, how gaming is where they live. Some people can't still even do Xbox. You'll hear people say, well, just do Game Pass. I always forget. There are multiple nations that don't have Game Pass.
Many.
That don't even have Xbox in them. So it's just, I just think that's what's exciting to me, is that people coming together and sort of going like, oh, I get it. And then there's new ideas. Unreal, somebody can grab Unreal for free and make a game right now in 10 minutes. So that means if you and I came up with a game when you were a kid or when I was a kid, we'd be like, what if I could do this?
Yeah.
You can do that. And there's something insanely empowering for gamers to be like, they're not doing it for me. I'm going to make a game where I'm this. I'm just going to go into Unreal and make it. So.
Yeah, that's what's so exciting about it, and we've seen this huge expansion of the gaming industry over the past few years now, and it's accelerating, and even more exciting to me to double down on your point there, the access to create, right? It's greater than ever, but it's not only that, right? It's the expansion of location. So we're seeing China, right, and South Korea, and all these cultures that we've learned about. Like I said this on a different show, that we have this. Many people in the gaming space have a love for Japanese culture. A lot of that derived from growing up with Japanese games that showed us Japanese people and cities and nuances and all these things about Japanese people that we would have otherwise not known, right? To a degree. And now we're going to get to see the Chinese view of that and the South Korean view of that and the Indian view of that and all these other,
and their mythologies. How many times have you seen a dragon and been like, I've seen that it's a European, which by the way, I love, but I also love Asian lung, the long serpentine dragons.
Yes.
But now you look at like China, where I believe it's China that doesn't allow undead in their games. No
Really?
lie. It's
I didn't
either
know that.
China. I don't think it's Japan because they've had Resident Evil and stuff, Biohazard.
Sure.
But yeah, there's something about undead completely. It can't be in a game. It's something about the spiritual. Isn't that weird? Like I remember hearing it from. We had somebody on the podcast who was like, "Yeah, this place." And then of course you have an entire group, India, massive.
Yeah.
Multiple places where a lot of third-party companies would hire them, but now though they don't need Activision.
Exactly.
If they want to make a game, they can do that, and
Yeah.
they can make a game with their mythology. They can make a game with their heroes, or mix them. And to me, that's pretty exciting because sometimes you do sort of. I don't get scared at Japanese games, for instance, because what they're putting on the screen never scares me. I usually laugh at it. So like I'll see Pyramid Head and I'll be like, dude, he's got a pyramid on his fucking head. What's scary about that? That's not scary. But Hindu, I don't know what stuff they have. I don't know what other religions have. I don't know what other weird creatures, Baba Yaga for Russia, like, a fucking house that runs around. I think Final Fantasy Remake had that. That kind of stuff is like,
it's cool.
Wouldn't it be amazing to be truly surprised one more time?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like that?
It's like what we see it last year, that Wukong game, and everyone was blown away by that video. It was like
Black
a 15-minute
Monkey.
video. Yeah. We saw that where everyone was like, "Holy shit, what is this?" And it's like, but see, that's a new developer from China. He's showing you things from their mythology and their culture. That's what excites me so much about it. Like it's new,
and they're doing. And dude, that game, by the way, I know some people said all it is like a resume. I don't want to hold you over. See, you're the host, and here I am talking.
It's fine, man. It's great conversation.
I mean, I know I'm supposed to be talking, but I'm saying I don't want to hold you, the host. But, dude, that game has me so excited. I saw some people say, oh, it's just a resume to get people where I don't care. Because people saw that, and if that company doesn't do it, somebody else is going to say, Monkey Man needs to be in my game ASAP. By the way, not sure if a lot of people know, there were an ape race in Bethesda games. And you could actually get mods for, I believe it was Oblivion, to put one of them in but they're not done a lot. And it's like, dude, that guy looks so cool. Like when I was watching that, it looked like a mixture of Ghost of Tsushima, Dark Souls, and then a monkey and weird magic that I was just like, I have no clue what's happening, but it looks
it looks amazing.
It's just like Kena. Kena came out and sort of Pacific Islander, sort of, mixed these different, like just sort of different nationalities all together, did their own thing, but still sort of understood Western audiences are going to want maybe autosaves or, whatever we may have. And to add all that together is dude, it's awesome. I've been playing around with Unreal, and I'm like, the idea that I can do this now, no arcane, magic needed. The ability to and 30-minute YouTube tutorials. By the way, that's the positive of YouTube tutorials.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt. Everyone goes to YouTube and solve anything now.
You can. Yeah. How many times you had a blue screen? You'd be like, I have an arcane blue screen with this code, blah, blah, blah. And if there's not a channel, there's some YouTuber who's like, if you have this, and you're just like, are you kidding? That's uploaded? Like the most arcane weird shit. And it's there. And that empowerment is probably dangerous as fuck now that I think about it. If somebody wants to do something they're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
I don't think about it that way.
There's a lot of curation that has to happen. Yeah.
So I'm Elon Musk of gaming, where I'm always like, we can do, and people are like, that's pretty dangerous. And I'm like, yeah, but let's do it and see what happens. Anyway, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Are you looking to try and create a game? Are you just learning it to kind of broaden your perspective?
Dude, I as you can tell, even right now, I never sleep. I'm just always doing something. So no, it's more because I want to be able. So I want to, if I'm doing the ascent, walking the walk, I want to sort of know, like, how do you handle this kind of issue? How do you handle, issues with throughput on your graphics card where you still want to show this, but you can't show that? Let's check it out in Unreal. I like to do a lot of D&D, and I do a lot of conceptual stuff. So like sometimes I'll think of a place I want to show that I want to explain to players. I'll be like, oh, well, shit, man, I'll throw a mountain up. I'll be like, is that sort of like what I want to see? Sometimes I'll make a desktop picture where I'll just because I want a desktop picture. I'll be like, I'm going to draw something. I would love to create something, but no, man, there's people so talented. Dude, listen to John Carmack whenever he talks. Like, if you think you're intelligent, dude, I was listening to him one time talk about VR,
Yeah.
And it was like in the first 5 minutes, I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like all my lobes were turning on, listening to this guy be like, well, technically the buffer comes across this. So if we change this, we can have the draw go in right at the end. And I'm like, how? No one would have thought of that, obviously. And he's had some failures. Mega textures didn't really turn out to be what he wanted, but the idea was sound. And that's fantastic, but it also reminds me I'm just a fucking blithering idiot. I talked to Victor about games, and I'm like, I think I know what I'm talking about. This is why I think a lot of reviewers should not just have them on their podcast, but just sort of cultivate a relationship with a couple devs.
Yeah.
To sort of be able to talk to them without the dev having to worry about it being recorded. Because I've had conversations, Victor's very open. But then sometimes you have a conversation where you'd be like, how would you handle this? And it may not be something that's the publisher might not want them to say, you know, because it might sound bad or whatever. And I'm not saying Victor's done this, but other developers have told me stuff where they're like, well, if we're having this issue with, like, let's say this kind of gamer where they're gaming this system, we might do this. We might even just move a box in front of that power up so not everybody sees it. And I was like, that's the most fucking ingenious. Like, no lie. One guy said this. He was like, they gray box. Do you know what gray boxing is?
Nope.
Gray boxing is when you like the idea of the structure of a level, but you don't want to texture it. So you literally put gray boxes so people can figure out how to jump and hide. He got past the gray box and he's like, man, everybody has this weapon. And everybody goes to the center spot. And one of the game testers, because that is something I've done. I worked on Watch Dogs and a couple other games for game testing. And one of the game testers was like, dude, just put a rock in front of it. And he was like, what? And he's like, it's a rocky spot. Just raise the rock up on the axes a little bit and hide that power up. And then see if new playtesters are seeing it. Completely fixed it. He was like, they were trying everything too. They were like, oh my God, we want this weapon to be here. It feels good. Everything, but everybody's having this choke point. It's like, let's raise this, let's lower this. And one podunk, I'm not calling him a name. I'm just saying, you know, everybody assumes a tester's low. We're not. But it's people, but some random dude, not John Carmack, you know, is just like, well, just put a fucking rock in front of it, and then people won't see it as easy. And only people who will see it will run around. And then if they run around, they'll be stuck there. That was another thing. He was like, if you make the hall a tiny bit longer, you put it behind a rock, people who do go to it, other people who know that they're going to go to it will hide and then capture them when they're trying to get to it. And you're like, fuck, what? And it works. And to me, that's what I love about games, is all of that tit for tat to make whatever masterpiece we're playing.
I was just going to say, what you described there is like, you know, nothing but a tiny sliver of what would go into creating a bigger experience, right? And that's even before you get to all the coding, the bug, you know, debugging and all of this stuff. Like when they say game design is absurd, you know, that's...
And you hear some of these games, you know, with 5 or 6 people. Ori had a small team. Ascent, they said they had a small team. They didn't. But small team or large team, the ability to have Unreal, regardless of the 10-cent connection, which is real, is just awesome. I don't want to hold you any longer, but this is me. Well, like, our podcasts are usually 5 hours long, so a 1-hour podcast. Do you put these up in a time? Are people going to be like, I can't watch this because I don't want to keep going?
No, these go up raw, just like this. This is us.
All right. Yeah. This is me caring about you folks listening, but that's the cool stuff, dude. Like you. I don't know, you know, and I don't know if you talk about what you do, but you've said you've done some stuff with AI and stuff. And now we're looking at like people who are coming to grips with AI level generation, where seeding, you know, a random seed. We've heard that since remember Sega Genesis, Nintendo days. It'd be like, if you enter a seed, it'll, you know, put a city map together for you.
Yeah.
It never really looked good. But now we're starting to get to the point where AI is saying, hey man, people love this part of the game. They're tracking heat maps. Like we saw a heat map for Quake. No, not Quake. It was I can't remember, but it was a shooter. They gave us their heat map, and that
Bungie used to do that for Halo.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. It wasn't them, but that is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And you could see how people moved.
Yep.
And it was amazing because they were like, "Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna adjust it every once in a while without telling anybody." And what they did was they raised a rock slightly higher than jump level. And then they put 2 rocks beside it, and they caused people to look and go, oh, I can't jump here. I'm going to go through the gap. But the gap now had an opening on the other side where somebody could shoot them. And it was anarchy. They said you could watch people learning. So they would record it. They made the change that night. They'd be, let's record every bit of game file. They'd record people playing, and the next day they'd be like, watch what happened. And you just like AI, if you've ever seen the dot learn how to play a game, people were going, die. And then they were like pausing and then going through because they were timing how long it took a person to sprint from their spawn point to get there. So if it took them 3 seconds, the person was running, waiting 5 seconds. So the person thought nobody was coming. So they ran, they go out and they get the kill. It was the most mind-blowing stuff. And they had all these diagrams. They were like, dude, we've traced this, we've traced that, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the guys who was working on it was like, but they always want it to be a little broken, a little lopsided. So like it's not clinical.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that too, where you've seen those games that feel clinical, where you're playing them and you're like, Call of Duty can feel that way, where you're just like, I know this level, I know how it's going to play out. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's very that funny enough, it's funny you bring Call of Duty as the example there, because if you remember, so Titanfall 1 I adored. I'm a big multiplayer gamer. I love competitive multiplayer. Titanfall 1 I adored, because what they did, they basically created this sandbox, right? And then they just created maps that were their own sandboxes that were asymmetrical, and you could kind of fit the Titans in all over the place. And, it was crazy. It was
beautiful anarchy.
Yeah, beautiful anarchy is a great way to describe it. And then Titanfall 2, while an amazing campaign, that's separate. The multiplayer, one of the lead designers on the multiplayer came from Infinity Ward or Treyarch, and they basically made the multiplayer maps the 3-lane design, which has traditionally been Call of Duty's thing. So you had left, middle, right, and they funnel you right through the map so that you're always running into people. For me personally, it completely ruined it. Like I never got into Titanfall 2 multiplayer because despite the movement, the mechanics, all of that was fantastic, right? But the fact that I couldn't just go anywhere with my Titan and my character, it just ruined it.
I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that switch, but that right, left, middle kind of League of Legends kind of thing.
Yes.
Works in those. But did you do Elden Ring yet?
Oh God, I have over 200 hours into it. Yeah.
So I did a walking the walk for Elden Ring, and one of the first things
I haven't watched it yet. I'm waiting to.
It's not a spoiler, but one of the first things I talk about is the moment you enter the world, you walk up and out, and what you see is a defining mark of somebody really intelligently knowing how people play games. If you look at the far right, there's an enemy flying. They're one of the flying guys a long ways away. So you're like far out. Evil guy flying, you're sort of identifying he might be powerful because he's flying, might be difficult. You see the dude on the horse, jackass on the horse, who blows everybody away. And then you see on the left what looks empty. But if you go there, they hid enemies over there that are actually can, for a lot of players, be difficult. And it's actually easier, I've found, if I go to the left, to sort of get enemies to come at me at the same time and die, because that game is definitely, especially when you're starting, you can die pretty easy against multiple enemies. It was very intelligent because they understood that and there were multiple lanes. There was 5, I think, at the starting, 5 sort of gaps in the architecture you could go to. But what was smart about them is they knew that a player might choose a certain spot, and then they wanted to juggle even that. So they hid people around the safe-looking spot. They made the guy who was far off all by himself. He was actually easy to kill. And then they made horse guy who looked amazing, resplendent on his horse, who just fucking roasted everybody. And it's funny, I beat him pretty easily, but I loved that setup because it felt like it wasn't 3 lanes. I could sort of feel that there was a 6 or 7. There was something about the way they put it up that did feel like geometry-wise, they sort of cut some paths at first, but they tricked people. And it was so cool because I was watching other people play, dude. I don't know. I did Samurai. What did you do?
My review build, I did Samurai, and I have 4 characters. I've played it a ton. Review build, I did Samurai, and then the main kind of big playthrough I did Warrior. So I do it like a fast dex build. I like dex builds.
So do I. And I'm a sucker for making sure I can have any armor I want, so a ton of stamina. Yeah. So when I went in there, I was also Samurai, which I felt the bow was pretty OP.
It was.
Yeah. And that's fine with me because I'm not one of those type of people that's like, I'm going to go out as a beggar with one arm and try to defeat everybody. And I'm just like, whatever, you do that. But I go out as that samurai. But that also changes, dude, because then you now have the ability to shoot farther. So now if you went out and saw this flying guy, your entire way of identifying danger might be different than mine. Magic user goes out. They have like, I know a lot of Magic users probably didn't look at the middle guy and go, I want to take him on, because he does look physical. And in fact, the Magic user, I think, is pretty easy character to play. Like, once you get leveled up, I actually think they're pretty suitable for a new person. But dude, great game. Doing a walking the walk for that was really fun. I don't think it's phenomenal as ever. Like, I don't know what the term would be. I'm not spiritually enlightened because I've played it, but it's definitely got, dude, they made dungeons dangerous again.
Yeah.
And to me, that every time we play a game, Morrowind, whatever, you sort of, a dungeon is to grind in. It's even the joke in most games. We're going to go to a dungeon and grind.
That's what Persona does. Dungeons are made for designing.
It's the entire
grinding.
And this, that's why I feel like it's sort of like D&D. Dungeons used to be dangerous in D&D. It used to be, that was the scary part. If you follow, and this is getting a historian of me, but if you follow all the sagas, the deep subterranean locations where the heroes died, nobody was just walking along and they were like, I mean, sometimes they were, but that wasn't what most sagas were about, is the deep, mysterious places, because humankind has a fear of those.
Yeah.
And every place I went, man, and admittedly, there were some dungeons that didn't look like dungeons in that game, where you were just like, da-da-da, what the fuck? But Elden Ring was awesome, because I just sort of knew. I was like, okay, this could be new guys. They did a very good job of teaching you what enemies would come in the future. There was the one dungeon right at the starting with the guys on the walls, the little imp dudes. And but it wasn't a hard dungeon. But what they were doing was they were like, in the future, you are going to face these guys. So we're going to put a dungeon very small with a couple little things. You don't even get it. I think you get the fire emblem in that one. Maybe you get a pretty shit item.
You get an amulet. Yeah.
Amulet. It's like a 1% to fire. And you're like, dude,
talisman,
I'll just roll out of the way. But you saw these guys, and what they were doing was teaching you that when those guys come up, these are the patterns you'll need to use to fight them. And you come out of that dungeon, that pretty weak dungeon, but you come out with these skills, and now you look around the world, and now you have those skills. And you start going, okay, can I face the guy on the horse? Because in fact, I don't know how you faced him. I faced him on a horse.
Okay, some people did. I never did. I never used my horse to fight. No.
What?
No.
Whoa, you're Iron Man.
I'm always like, in those games, I'm a big Souls guy. I love those games to death. So my thing is all timing. Like the way I play is,
you mean up close,
up close and personal. Everything is timing. Like, I just make a miss. Yeah. So that's just the way I play.
Yeah, that's too. I mean, I don't know. That's pretty stressful. I mean, I have no issue with playing that way, but I feel like I would die a lot more. I don't think I'm that good. The horse just looked good too. Admittedly, I have videos of me just like double jumping off the guy's head, being like ta-ta-da, and just looking cool. And I was showing people in our Discord, being like, that I didn't even hit him. Look how fucking cool that looks.
How well implemented was that horse, man? It's so well implemented. Like,
dude, they did it. They did exactly what they needed to do. They still had the animations to make it look real, like when you stop and turn, but they had some weight. And when you would fight a giant and you would like go between his legs and turn that horse on a dime, and then he'd swing, and they warned me in the review build. I don't know if you got the review code.
I did. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it, but maybe it was in the in that weird guide we got. But
we got the partial guide.
Said, dude, which by the way, way worse than just playing the game normal. But anyway, somewhere there, or perhaps in a preview, somebody said jumping isn't a very good defense tactic. I don't know what world they lived in. I jumped a lot over the top of enemies who were swinging at me, and on the horse you could then double jump.
Yes.
And dude, they implemented it. They nailed it, man.
Yeah, I think Elden Ring is one of those that I cherish. To your point, it's spiritually enlightening. I think some people have taken it to the next level, but I do adore that game to death.
Is it your favorite of the Dark Souls
of the From game? Yes, it is. Yeah, I think it's their best one.
Did you ever do Neo?
Yep,
2?
I did. Neo 1 and 2. So Neo's interesting.
Neo 2 was awesome.
See, Neo, I really, really enjoy those games. And the thing I'm also like, I always joke I'm a loot whore in games. Like, I love loot games, Diablo, Borderlands.
Yeah.
It's just, I love those games. So Neo, I love the way they do loot, because it's randomized. You have rarities and bonuses, and it's really deep into character building. The one thing I don't like about Neo is the level design, in the sense of the levels are designed really well, but they're very compact. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And they're
No, I know
individual.
what you mean.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
Whereas,
they're compact and they feel almost tiled, almost like a board
yes,
game in the way they're
exactly.
Yeah.
And some people really like that, but I love in the Souls game how everything is one big thing that connects. That's one of my favorite things about it. So if Neo had the combat and loot system mixed with like a connecting open world, oh my god, I might not leave the house, man. That would be
I'm
my dream.
Kurosagama fucking lover. The chain and sickle, the chain, and Neo
yeah,
allowed for that. And I go in there but it is so tight, dude. It is so tight. And they'll be like, there's the one part where the samurai walking over like a dirt bridge and you have to go under the dirt bridge. This is only about 2 hours, 3 hours into the game. And I was like, the camera isn't really great for these tight spots. I think that's something it failed at. Sekiro, I liked a lot, but Sekiro had its own issues. I think the one nice thing about Elden Ring that Neo did not do, Neo's just like, welcome to Fuckland. And you get killed. And then you have Sekiro, which I felt tried a little bit more, but sometimes you get like, it was like, here, use this grapple, use this, and then you get the ogre who grab you from a mile away, and you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
I hated that guy. But Elden Ring with the open world, I think, helped because it gives humans don't learn under stress as well. Some people will say they do. Like, I learn under stress well, but not as well as not under stress. That's the way humans work. And those games, dude, and it sounds like you're a fan. The From games have always pissed me off because for the most part, they don't let a person who wants to get in, who's headstrong, who isn't headstrong, it doesn't really give them a chance. My friend Cadiz tried 3, and I think on 3 there's a spiked, like, dude with a spear right at the starting, and it just killed Cadiz like 6 times. He's like, fuck it, I'm not playing. I'm done.
I've got friends like that too.
Yeah, that's the best part about Elden Ring is if you do defeat a guy, there's space, and it allows the brain to go, okay, I jumped, I rolled, I defeated the guy by doing this, but you look at your health bar and you're like, okay, but he did a lot of damage to me. You also learn that you can stab people and run off, which was my claim to fame. I should have just been called the stabber. Every person I faced, you can even see it in my preview video. Every person I faced, I'd be like, nah, and I'd look at the health bar to see how much damage I was doing. I'd be like, oh shit, and I'd leap on the horse and be like, that guy, I can't take him. But that kind of gameplay is not possible in most of the Dark Souls games until either later on when you get to a swamp or ever in maybe 1 and 2. I think we're a little too tight for that. So that's where I think Elden Ring helps.
Yeah, 3 Souls 3 broadened it out. That was my favorite prior.
Dude, mine too. Souls 3 is
a godly game. Yeah, godly game. Those bosses, I could rave about Souls 3 all day. I think Elden Ring did some things built on top of it though. Your point about like the building blocks that Elden Ring does, the way it's designed to kind of give the player curiosity in how they explore the world. And then, as you rightly said, just really slowly, at least at the start, kind of build their skills. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this functions this way and this functions this way. Oh shit, I did that. I'm going to die. And you start to really understand how that world's put together. And then over the course of the journey, it just blew me away, man. It just goes crazier and crazier as you go. It's unreal.
And there was never a ogre dude like Sekiro. I did not feel cheated. In Sekiro, I felt cheated. I was DMing the developers when I was reviewing that. And I was like, this guy's hitbox is ridiculous.
It's stupid.
He was grabbing me. He was like, he would leap to do a double kick and reverse in the air if I was behind him and hit me anyway. And I was like, guys, I'm legit. I don't get frustrated. I'm mad. Neo 2 never happened. I faced off against the horse first boss like 140 times. You couldn't summon souls because it wasn't online at the time. So I was by myself. I couldn't summon ghosts or whatever it was called. But that's the thing. I don't think Elden Ring has. Well, I know that some people feel certain bosses. The guy prior to Margaret, no, I call him Margaret. It's like Megrot or whatever.
There's Margit, and then there's Godric.
So, dude, Godric, I took me a couple times, but I figured out that guy on that fucking dude on the bridge, he killed me way more. I don't know why. The guy prior to Godric, Margaret or whatever.
Oh, Margit.
Margit.
Yeah,
I was calling Margaret because
Margaret.
Dude, that guy roasted me. Oh shoot, I forgot. My cleaners are here. I do have to go. I'll be out there in a second. Anyway, I do have to go. Sorry,
Okay,
sorry I held
man.
you so long. I love talking
No,
about games.
not at all, man. It's a great time. So, real quick, go ahead and shout out anything you want kind of listeners to know, man.
Yeah, ACG. I think it's Angry Centaur Gaming still is the URL, but you can find me reviewing games, doing the walking the walk still. The podcast is on Friday at 10:30 Pacific Standard Time, 10:30 a.m., not p.m. And we have 4 people from around the world, international podcast where we talk about games, food. We have developers on. We'll have you on. Make sure to DM
man,
me
I would love to.
Twitter, and we'll get you on.
I would love to.
All right, I'm going to get going.
All right, brother. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. That was a blast.
It's been fun, man. I'll talk to you more. Peace.
All right, see ya, bud.